Welcome back to the Brennan Page. I'm Dwayne Page.
And this is Kyle Brennan. Today we have the luxury of speaking with Taylor Jones. Taylor grew up in Kent, Washington, where he played at Kentwood High School and helped lead his team to a state championship in 2012. He continued his baseball career at Gonzaga University, where he excelled as a first baseman and pitcher. In his senior year, he tied a program record with 27 doubles, ranking second in the NCAA. After being drafted by the Houston Astros in the 19th round of the 2016 MLB Draft, Taylor steadily climbed the minor league ranks and made his major league debut on July 26, 2020. He was also on the roster during the 2022 season, and he has a World Series ring, which I did not realize until he told us on the call. After his time in Houston, Taylor continued his professional career in the Giants and Angels organizations before retiring from the game. In 2024, he took a coaching position with the Houston Astros, being their complex rookie ball hitting coach. And Dwayne, that's where I got to meet Taylor. And my relationship with Taylor was exciting and unique because he was first transitioning into coaching. And I was, having been there for a few years already, I was kind of helping him get his feet wet a little bit. And the thing that's so unique and inspiring about Taylor is just how, as you know, coming off being a big leaguer, how open he was to learning how to coach with a complete beginner's mind, as if he had, never been there and done that for all the different things he did. And Taylor and I would get into these long conversations, in the cages or just at lunch. And when the two of us, me and you, decided to start this podcast, he was one of the first people that came to mind, because I'm like, Taylor and I have done podcasts before, just no one was recording. So this one was fun.
Yeah, you definitely spoke very highly of Taylor and did give me the caveat that you thought him and I would get along really well, which, I mean, when you talk about like instantly excited to have a conversation with somebody, that's exactly how I felt. I mean, pretty early on, I was like, this guy, I love his perspective. I love his approach to the game when he described his approach to the game as a player. And you can tell by his personality that his approach to becoming a coach is incredible and will help him just become an incredible coach, in my opinion. So it was a very enjoyable conversation for me, myself, selfishly, and it's something that I'm excited for people to listen to. Yeah. Yeah, and
I
we
like
all
it.
we all also have had that coach that's all sunglasses all the time, no matter what weather.
Yes. Yes. 100%.
Where you can't see his freaking eyes, and you're like, dude, I can't even tell if this guy's looking at me or not right now.
Yes. Yes.
He's blacking out, eyes closed, just delivering a speech.
Yeah.
It goes perfect with the aesthetic.
I was the only time Taylor, I'm glad you listened to a couple episodes beforehand, because the only time I'm a little bit worried about the sunglasses is that if someone doesn't know you yet, they might be like,
Right.
who am I about to like
Sure.
talk to,
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Right.
because Dwayne, you do have nice eyes.
Yeah, no, I know. I was gifted. I was gifted, but you know what, man?
Uh,
They're harmful and sensitive to this light, unfortunately.
I hear you.
Oh man, it's processing that little 20-second test run I did. So
So,
I'll
tell me the connection. You guys played with each other? You guys from the same area?
We're from a similar area. He's from like a Ward Melville, which is probably like 15, 20 minutes away from where I live. He's a couple. You're 2 years older than me, or one?
probably like two and a half,
Yeah, like
like
two
two
and
and
a
a half
half
years
years
old.
older than me. We never played together. I saw him when we were in college. We used to work out in the same facility. Like, we weren't really chatting or anything. I'm sure you know Kyle at this point. He's not a chatty guy. He's not going to run over and chat with a bunch of guys that he doesn't know. But I always knew of him because, I mean, you can't fucking miss him. He's a giant catching dude, and you know the guy's a stud. But fast forward to like 2019, again, just I've interacted with him in this camp, Catcher Metrics, which we've been doing for years. We've been coaching. We both were a part of it as catchers growing up, and then we started helping out with it, coaching with it. So we'd kind of known each other in passing, and then 2019, I got a job at my old high school. He got a job at his old high school as assistant coaches. We wound up coaching against each other in the county championship game. We won, but so Kyle and I had that interaction there. And then actually after that game was when we started having like a little bit more of a connection. We worked like I think it was tryouts at the end of the month together. Kyle got to watch me throw to second base and be like, "Oh, this guy's actually a pretty good catcher. Like, what was wrong?" And then he asked me, and I was like, "I couldn't fucking hit, bro. I couldn't hit, bro. Like, I didn't have any. I had no juice. Like, I don't know what else to tell you." And then
Yeah.
had me on after COVID. He had me on the what's it called? What was
Well,
it?
no,
What was it
actually,
first called?
before that, so at that, this was like in the fall
Yes,
of
fall of
2019,
2019.
where
Yeah.
we're in the cages, and you had wanted to join the army. You were considering it, and you were
Yes,
like,
yes, that's right.
you were full a couple months away to like, I'm gonna report to basic training, or I don't remember the timeline, but you had like 2 or 3 months at a minimum where you're like, hey, like I've been, and I guess you knew that I had like a strength conditioning esque background, so you were asking me some questions like, I've been training for it, like I don't know how to balance the running and lifting and this and that, and I had started, I backed out of PA school and I had started a training business, so I was doing something out of a gym where
That's
there's like
right.
batting cages and then a like a little gym area, and I was trying to
And the
build this
fucking
program.
the treadmills, the sprint treadmills.
Yeah,
Yes, I
they
remember that
those
shit, bro.
curved. Taylor, you've done those like the
Yeah.
curved wood weight things, yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Those are tough, dude.
So we yeah, well I was like, all right, well I'm working out during the day before I start anyways. Like, why don't you just come like train with me? Like, I'll have to charge you enough because they're gonna charge me to have you there, so you have to pay for that. But like, I'm not gonna charge you, and like it'll be like a training partner slash get Dwayne ready for basic training. So we started as like that relationship a little bit, and then you end up, having second thoughts, and then deciding that wasn't, you weren't ready for that type of a career yet.
I wanted to
And
take a
then,
chance on a fucking college baseball career. I wanted to take a chance on a. I remember that fall was when I went for an interview with Stevenson. So I got that offer, and I was kind of like, you know what, man, the Army thing doesn't sound so chill. I
Mhm.
think I'm gonna go and take a chance at a big, like a big jump. Like it was a full-time assistant, paid assistant type position at, I think it was like Stevenson University or something like that, which I wound up not getting. But yeah, that's when that whole training thing stopped. I was kind of like, yeah, it's not for me.
Mhm.
And then Kyle and I became actual friends after, a
yeah,
little
and
while.
then I realized like, oh, like Dwayne's been, coaching catchers, and I've heard him talk about interactions, with, because he had been coaching travel ball and stuff, like his interactions with his players and whatnot, and I'm like this is pretty good. I was like, we do these, they were like really leadership calls, but they were catching and like catching analytics and talking about pitcher catcher relationship and calling pitches. Like it was stuff on a Zoom call. So we'd been doing, I had been doing that. And then Dwayne was like, "Oh, it's cool. It's interesting." I was like, "Yeah, come on." And then after like a call or two, I was like, "Dwayne's really good at this." And then so then we do the calls, and then after the call, we would hit stop recording. The players would leave, and then the two of us would just kind of keep going for a little bit.
Nice.
So we would, then we talk about the call and like getting guys to buy in, or the concepts, and like how could we do for next week, and then it came like a partnership where it was like, okay, I want to see what Dwayne has in mind, because I was actually learning from Dwayne on the calls that I was initially running, and then the conversations we had after, we would be like, this should be a podcast.
Yeah,
Oh
probably
yeah.
said that like a
So
dozen or so times.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
so
I
that's
love that.
yep, and then it's kind of best buds from there. But yeah, man,
Awesome.
uh,
And now we're here. I love it.
Yeah.
and
There's
now
so
we're
many
here.
times where guys get done with a conversation, they're like, "Man, we should have a podcast," and then it never happens. So I'm glad that you guys actually followed through with it.
Yeah, that's really the structure of these calls, though. It's and when I tell people about it, because I'm in a situation where I'm around people that I've been around for a while. I've been lived here my whole life. I've been training kids here for about 6 years now. I've coached on Long Island for about 10 years, which is crazy to say, but so I'm around a lot of these people, and they see Instagram posts, or I've talked about the podcast here and there, and I describe it. And the easy way is saying, they're leadership calls. We have a lot of people like yourself who leadership qualities, love to hear about your experience, and also selfishly, I find myself learning so much from people like yourself coming on these calls and talking about whether it's, your journey through baseball, those kinds of things, your experience out off the field, whatever it may be. I feel like I learned so much, but when I describe it, it's like, hey, you ever been at a baseball field? The game's over, practice is over, and you're sticking around with your buddies or a parent of one of your friends or something, and then you're talking, and next thing you know, it's 2.5, 3 hours later, and it's getting dark, and it's like, shit, we got to get out of here. Like that's kind of the idea of the calls, and then they're like, oh, okay, interesting, and then they listen, and that's why I've been so grateful and appreciative of the feedback, because they're like, dude, I've had so many former teammates be like, dude, I miss these kinds of conversations, like this stuff, like people that aren't around the game like we are. And I miss these kinds of conversations, dude. I felt like I was there. So the feedback has been super, super positive and awesome, which I appreciate so much.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. It seems like the more we go on, podcasts are becoming such a big thing. We're starting to see how sitting down and communicating with one another and just like passing information is like so much of like the human element. And
Hmm.
there's really been exposed right now as far as everybody having, a platform to talk and share information. And everybody has something, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody has something that's said that like sparks an idea or um, something they can learn from. So I'm glad you guys are doing this. That's cool.
Yeah. Your wife's been doing a bit here and there, right?
Yeah, so like I said, her boss is getting into the pod space, and they set up a whole studio and everything, and they do a lot of uh, health, fitness focused podcasts, a little bit of mindset stuff as well, but a lot of it has to do with like losing weight or getting in shape or building a routine. So um, her and him will get on quite a bit. I think they've done like three or four together, uh, and they'll run podcasts. I think they're going to probably start doing more of that. I know now she's working, doing a little bit more of the social media side with their gyms. So I think they'll probably start to have a little bit more banter back and forth and have more conversations. So yeah, she's getting good at it too. And it's funny because we'll sit at home and we probably should start recording it, but we run our own stuff. We sit on the porch and we'll go through different concepts and topics throughout the day, and that's good. Like I said, I think it's like a huge part of who we are as humans sitting and having conversations is such a natural, and it's like a cathartic thing too. It feels like
Hmm.
it's almost therapeutic to sit down and discuss what's on your brain. So
It is
um,
therapeutic.
yeah,
My experience with you over the past year and doing stuff like this, informally, just at lunch after we'd sit down for a few hours and be like, man, we've been here for a couple hours. Like, we'd probably get up and like drink something.
yeah,
Just been
yeah,
going. That's why I'm
yeah.
excited to have you
It's
on.
crazy. Time like it just dissolves. Like the time scale doesn't exist when you start talking. All of a sudden, like you look up at a clock and you crush 3 hours. So it's kind of crazy how that works.
Yeah, time will just melt away. You look back like, oh, 12 minutes went by. Like, oh, look, 20 minutes went by. Oh, 5 minutes went by. And then you don't look, and next thing you know, you're like, oh, I gotta go.
Well, like you're
Yeah.
saying, we're sitting in the cafeteria, we start a conversation, things full, and then by the end of our conversation, we look around like nobody else is here. All the staff is left. Everybody's cleaned everything. We're still sitting at this table. We probably
They're
should get
cleaning the
up and go
table
do
when we're sitting
something.
at it. We feel bad.
Yeah,
The universal sign to like, hey, maybe you guys should go. Somebody starts coming over and cleaning the
politely
table.
start scrubbing the table near you. It's like, get the fuck up.
You
Oh,
finished
man.
with this? Damn.
So speaking of your wife, you guys just came back from a huge trip.
Actually, so this is a solo mission. Yeah. So we had a trip in November. We did South Africa together, and
Wow.
then this year, like I told you previously, like I wanted to take some time and do a lot of travel, and so we got done with that trip. Uh, and I proposed. I was like, hey, like, what about another trip at the end of January? Because we had been gone to South Africa in November, and we did like a domestic trip for family during the holidays. We did like a big get together in Arizona, and then we had another trip during Christmas time. She got back and she's like, I got to get back to my clients. Like, I don't know if I could do another trip at the end of January. So I was all right, we'll plan something a little later. But she was like, this would be a great opportunity for you to go do a long trip because she knows I've always wanted to do like a big trip solo. And obviously, like during college and all that, I didn't get the opportunity to do any travel, so that's kind of why I'm getting the bug now. And so she's like, "You can go do something, just do something that I would want to do, or that I'd be nervous about." And she has like a lot of dietary restrictions, and she gets nervous about food here and there, and so. Uh, Dairy is like a huge one that she kind of stays away from. And so I was like, all right, I wanted to go back to Asia because I've been to Thailand, and so I was like, all right, where'd be a good spot? So I picked India, and just because of the chaos and so much is going on, and the food for her, she knew it probably wouldn't be a trip she could handle right away. She kind of wanted to wait on that one. So I ended up going. I was there for 3 weeks. Um, yeah, crazy experience.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I know that you had mentioned that that's something you wanted to do after
Hmm.
last year's, like, take advantage and explore some things and do some of this and that before, the inevitable parts of life, like marriage, kids, career, and kind of make that. There's a window for that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
we're kind of in that window right now, and you kind of alluded to this previously. It's not been something you've had the privilege to do. You know, people say, "Oh, you travel for baseball, whether it's travel baseball or college or anything." I'm like, bro, it's not, it's not like that. We're
Yeah.
here. You see a couple things. Maybe you see something on the bus ride in or a plane ride, and you're like, all right, I got to come back to this place. Or maybe you're in a certain city, and you're like, I'm never going back to that place
Yeah.
again after playing
Right.
there or something like that. So that's kind of something that's been on your mind for a while now to get this kind of traveling in.
For sure. And like you're saying, you move around, especially through college and pro ball. Some of the towns aren't so great. And then sometimes, you get to higher enough levels, some of the cities are pretty sweet, and that does scratch the itch, but it also kind of makes you want to do more, especially outside of the country. And so I was, blessed to be able to do it um, in the country with baseball. And I'm a big explorer. Like I like exploring things. I've had this conversation with Kyle before. It's just there's something about it, whether it's, people that are different than me or places. I like doing things that are a little unique and different, I guess. Um, and so yeah, like you guys said, get to that point in time where settling down is going to be right around the corner. Kids are a big conversation for us right now. We have that little bit of a window of let's play around and go explore. So um, that's kind of what we're doing right now, and we're hoping to do a little bit more. We'll see. Madison actually just got enrolled with massage therapy school, so that'll take a lot of the summer out of play. So um, we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, man. Luckily, we got to hit South Africa during November, which was amazing. Saw a lot of cool things, met a lot of cool people, and then this India trip was pretty unreal. Just meeting different people from around the world, you start to gain perspective about what's going on here, and for good and bad. Um, so it was really cool. You learn a lot. I learned a lot just in 3 weeks being there.
And you said that this was to India was a solo mission too. Were you were
Yeah.
the only person, like you didn't travel with anybody else? It was just you.
Yeah, just me. I had some friends, some older friends that had gone to India before, and they told me their experience. And then I have a neighbor that lives here, who's from India. They told me a few things about it, and it kind of piqued my interest. And I didn't really know a whole lot about the country or places that I'd visit. They have like a golden triangle in northern India that's kind of the touristy spot. It's like Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur, and those three spots are pretty touristy. Um, so I knew eventually I'd probably hit those, but I didn't really have like an itinerary or anything. I bought a flight to the southern part, which was like Mumbai, kind of the east or the west southern part of India, and then a flight back from Delhi, and that was pretty much it. I did the hotels. I didn't have. I knew a few of the monuments that I'd probably hit along the way, but didn't really have many plans. Just kind of went, and as I talked to people and locals there, picked their brain, figured out like what I should do. I kind of built my days on that. And I never was really more than a day or two ahead of myself. So everything was kind of like on the fly, which was kind of cool.
Uh,
But yeah, man, it it was a great experience. I'm blessed because like not a lot of people in my position like they have a spouse that's like, hey, like go on a trip and explore yourself and be cool with it. And um, very thankful for that because it was an experience that probably one of the best experiences that I've ever had.
you've always said something to me that your relationship with her, just coming up through the years, that I'm going to get the wording wrong, but you said more or less the constant in our life is change.
Yeah.
Now, you guys, if I remember correctly, you guys have been together on and off, but initially in high school.
Yes.
So I
Yep.
want to go back to that time in your life, whether middle school, high school, or maybe something before that, if it's important. Uh, I'd love to hear, like, at that point in your life, who is Taylor? What's your perception of the world? What's your experience like? How's baseball tying in? Because we
Damn.
haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, what a great question. Uh, who was Taylor? I mean, I was everything was built around like the um the system of going to school and sports. Like ingrained early with my parents of, you need some solidarity, you need a system that you can rely on. Um, which is probably why I like so much play now is because I grew up with just like, all right, you're gonna go to school, you're gonna do your work, you're gonna go to practice, and that was kind of it. And I was so busy doing those things and so focused on doing those things that, it keeps you out of trouble and you guys know it starts building certain characteristics and um, behavior patterns. So I don't know. I guess as a middle school and high schooler, it was just school and baseball and basketball at the time. And I was big into school. I loved learning. I loved um, like figuring things out. I always felt like I naturally gifted athletically, had a great frame, was athletic, but figuring things out always kind of took a little bit for me, like for whatever reason. Like I would struggle with something, but then I'd like that because it was almost like a puzzle trying to figure it out. And I'd kind of struggle, struggle, struggle. And then finally, for whatever reason, something would click, and then I would take off and figure it out and then like move on to the next with it. Um, so yeah, I was always curious. I think I was a little weird if I was to look back and uh, like see myself. I probably was like an introverted extrovert, if that makes sense. Like a quiet kid that always wanted to talk to people on the side or like wanted to pick people's
Yeah,
brains.
I can see that
Um,
where you you like being by yourself in the terms of like you'll go and do these trips, or you'll
yeah,
spend some time on the beach, on an off day, or like things like that, but then you'll also sit and talk to strangers for a couple hours.
yeah,
It's a cool
yeah. No,
dynamic.
I very much like my personal time, but um, I do. I don't know whether it's like an energy thing or whatever. I like sitting and talking to people, especially people I don't know, um, and like getting their perspective. 'Cause I feel like I've learned so much, and this kind of goes back to the conversation of like what you guys are doing with podcasts. Like you learn like little things that you just don't normally think about because you're in a pattern or a rhythm of thinking going throughout your day, and then when you talk to somebody that isn't really connected to you or in your world who's kind of thinking on a totally different wavelength, you start thinking about things differently. It's like, huh, I think I'm going to start thinking of things like that, or I'm going to start looking at things in a certain way. And so I've always just navigated towards, I guess, people that were different because it seemed like it offered like hidden gems, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so being interested in other cultures and people with different perspectives has always been something that's been significant to you, which is I definitely find myself aligned with that. I've always enjoyed, and I definitely, and Kyle can attest to this. I'm somebody that I like to poke holes in perspectives and arguments. I like to find another way to do something, even if it's something that's completely out of left field, so to speak. And that's why I enjoy, like you said, talking to so many different kinds of people because it's just exciting to have your eyes open to a completely different way of life. When you're in the system of go to school, go to sports, go home, you can kind of get stuck in that whole rhythm. So it's nice to hear that you had that fascination and that interest from such a young age.
Hmm. I like that the concept that you talked about, poking holes. What, because I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Like, what draws you to the idea of like poking holes in perspective, or maybe the way people think?
Well,
What
part
makes
of it
you?
definitely comes from I like to talk shit. Like I like to talk shit. So whether it's I like to bust somebody's chops a little bit. Like I definitely can do that, and it's fun. But also, so there's a couple different, I would say a couple different gears to it. One is sometimes letting people know, hey, it's not that serious. Hey, you don't need to live and die by this sort of perspective, this sort of this ideology. You don't need to live and die by it. It's not that serious. And two is also for me personally, I had an experience growing up where you always think that there's one answer or the other. You want to be right. You want to be right. And then when you get past that point and that veil is kind of lifted and you're like, no, actually, the answer is such an array of things. There's so many different answers. There's so many different ways to accomplish things. It was like the freaking holy grail for me, dude. It was so exciting and so eye-opening for me. So I always like to, with the players that I coach, with the people that I interact with, I like to remind them that, like, you know what, we may have accomplished this goal this way, but we probably could have done it about 15 or 16 different ways. And that's good. That's fine. That's okay. And I wouldn't say conflict, but I can definitely appreciate when something doesn't work and trying to figure out why it doesn't work. And then I like when somebody, like, honestly, one of the most exciting things, because I've been coaching for a good amount of time now, one of the most exciting things is doing something with a player in a training environment or a team environment, and then they come up to you saying that they don't like it because they think that it should be done this way. And then you have that moment where you're kind of processing, like, oh my God, this guy's right. That's the most exciting for me. That's the most exciting thing for me that I've been experiencing the past couple of years is when a player's like, Coach, I see why we're doing this, but I think this is a little bit better. And it's like, I don't know, like, it gets the hair standing up on the back of my neck right now. I love that stuff when it's like, you know what, this freaking kid, this 17, 18-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, this guy's right. And that shows me that this game, when we're talking about baseball and society and so many things, is headed in the right direction because these younger people are thinking in such creative ways. And I know that people like myself and the guys that I work around, or the people that I work around, kind of encourage that thought processing. We encourage challenging certain things in a respectful way, but also thinking creatively and taking a sense of ownership over what it is that we're doing. So that's a little bit long-winded on the poking holes and things, but it's just the curiosity. Like yourself, interested in other cultures. I consider myself a historian too. I always loved studying history when I was younger, and I still do. So I'm always naturally a little bit curious.
That's good. Yeah, that friction is almost like builds heat or like energy, and
Hmm.
that like sparks conversation, it sparks thought, and I think at times it feels like environments can want to shy away from that because it feels like it's confrontational. But if you can find a way to do it in a manner that is inviting or like sparks that conversation, like you're saying, I feel like that's beautiful. It's like how it should work.
Yeah.
Yeah. That friction that you bring up, Taylor, Dwayne, that's something that we've talked about, privately, especially with different relationships, romantic or just your friends, where you'll purposely like create some friction or poke holes or like do something that you know is going to agitate someone because one, you want to see where that point is, but then also you get you get more of a raw, you get better insight. I think is what is your goal for it. You get better insight as like who they are and what they're like. You get to that sooner than you would if you just kind of like, "Ah, I don't know how they feel about that," and you avoid or dance around it.
Yeah,
Right.
you learn a lot about egos at that point too, when those kinds of things happen. We always try to establish this. I think when Caputo was on, we talked about this. We had this conversation with our college guys recently. Is, dude, when you show up to the yard, like, leave your ego at home. We're all here to improve. Sometimes you're going to get exposed and that's okay. But listen, when you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old guy, that ego is freaking pumping. You know, that
Hmm.
testosterone's going, that ego's pumping. You feel like you take a lot of things personally. And I know for me too, you get into your mid to late 20s and then you realize that ego it can really be a weight that kind of holds you back to a lot of different perspectives. And when you can kind of let your guard down, let that ego down, get that ego away, realize everything's not personal, everything's not
Hmm.
about you, like you can get some serious progress in the form of conversation and understanding.
It's interesting that you guys are talking about, because you're both very similar in this regard, that, yeah, very curious about other things and interested in different ways to do stuff. And you guys naturally seek that, whereas I don't naturally seek those things. I will kind of learn them the hard way and then realize like, oh, that's not the right way to do it, or I was wrong, and it's like not a easy pill for me to swallow. Um, a part of it's ego, and part of it's just like I didn't want to be doing something that wasn't the best for whoever I'm around. Uh, so there's like each time I go through that, it's almost like pulling something off and it's uncomfortable. But then after, and I kind of get over it, it's just like it's lighter. Like
Mm.
it's like easier to breathe.
Yeah. I think you guys are bringing up a key concept, the ego. Um, I have a question with that because I've been kind of playing around with that concept a little bit. Uh, I'm working with some younger guys here in Vegas, and I've been thinking a lot about the concept of ego. Because obviously, like you guys explained, like if you can kind of break down that wall a little bit and open yourself up to vulnerability, you're usually gonna take more in. You're gonna learn more. You're gonna be a better teammate. All that. Is there a good place though for ego? Is there like a good part of that ego that comes to competing and playing a sport?
Absolutely. I know. I think that if you think about it in a small example, which I mean it's pretty big in our game, but you know whether you're, I always listen to one of the pitching coaches, which I hope we have him on one day. Well, not a pitching coach; he's a head coach at a Catholic high school here on Long Island. This guy Paul Parcelano talks about when you're a pitcher and you're on the mound, embracing that spotlight. You know, thinking to yourself like I'm the guy right now, I'm the guy in the middle of the field, and owning that, which I definitely think that that's empowering and it's something that can instill confidence. There's always multiple sides to it. You know, one day maybe you get undressed, you get beat up a little bit on the mound, and now, you know, is it hard to attain that spotlight image? I don't know. Personally, I'm not a pitcher. I've never pitched really, so I can't really speak to that. But I do think ego is important. I do think pride is important in regards to what it is that you're doing. But it's a hard skill to learn at a young age to say, at this moment I need to say I'm the best freaking dude on the planet at doing this. I'm the best hitter right now. I can beat this pitcher right now. It's hard to say, okay, this is the time to be like this, and this is the time where you should let that ego down. You know, be a little bit more vulnerable. Because when you think about, because, you know, you guys both competed at higher levels than I did as an individual, as a player. You know, I can't imagine, and I could be wrong, but Taylor, I can't imagine playing at the level that you did and saying, I'm going to be vulnerable today in the batter's box against, you know, 95 plus. Like, I think you might be feeling a little bit vulnerable in general if the guy's throwing freaking frisbees up there. But I
Right.
think if you're approaching that with, I'm going to be vulnerable today in my at bat, like, you know, you might get beat. So I think in your way of competing as a player, you might have some answers to your own question there in regards to, listen, I'm the best freaking dude here. I've prepared all week. I'm ready to go. I'm fortified in that. But then maybe when it's time to receive some criticism from a coaching staff, when it's time to take a look at some analytics of your swing, when it's time to look at some video, maybe be a little bit vulnerable when there's some criticism involving those things. So I think in dealing with these younger guys, it's just letting them know that, hey, there are different gears to this. There is a time and place to be like this, or there is a time and place to be like that. I think that's what kind of needs to be established. Because I know for me personally, again, speaking from my experience, it's like I have to be like this all the time. I got to be hardcore as fuck. I need to be like balls to the wall all the time. Like that's how I always have to be all the time. And if I'm not, I fucking suck. Like that's just, you know,
Yeah.
kind of the mentality that I had going into these things sometimes. So I think introducing them to the concept that, hey, sometimes you're going to be like this, sometimes you're going to be like that, and that's okay.
Right.
I'm curious if I'm thinking of like other sports, like the NFL comes to mind, where guys that are really good at fueling or like fueling that fire of like I'm not going to be denied. I have this super hyper aggressive way about me. In a sport like that, you're literally running into someone, and whoever pushes more for longer is going to win. It's like you need to be that way, but then a lot of people that are very good at that have trouble turning that off outside of that instance. So going back to like catching or baseball, catching in the terms of you need to like when I was playing, I would think like I tried to be better than the other catcher. I tried to work harder than him. I tried to block more balls. I tried to receive every pitch well. Like that was like it was an ego. Um, and at times that could bleed into like being stubborn with a pitcher or other things. I could see as a hitter, I wasn't like this as a hitter, but in talking with really good hitters, they have that confidence in themselves. Like their mindset is different. But then like you also want to be a good teammate and a good person to be around and a good boyfriend, husband, father, like outside of it. So it's definitely a blend. It's not yes or no. It's nuanced.
Yeah, and that's where I find myself with the young guys because you want to teach them the balancing act, but sometimes you'll have a kid that he oozes the ego, and it's like I don't want to take that away from him because that could be his superpower. You know, you look at so many big leaguers or really like you're saying any professional athlete, um, and a good majority of them, the best of them, have crazy ego. Like Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan because he thought he was the greatest always, you know, and he worked his butt off and still put in the work, but there's something about great players that they just know they're the best or that they have that mindset of that swagger and that confidence. Um, so it is like you don't want to take that away from a player, but at the same time, you need to find a way that they can be humbled. So maybe that's just through challenging them or pushing them in a certain way where you don't necessarily like dismiss the one side, but yet still put them in a situation where they can kind of understand that balance because it is like I knew for myself, like I go about life with probably very little like certain level of like flamboyance or certain confidence. But when I played, like I almost had to tap into like a different character to be able to compete at that level. You know what I'm saying? Like I had to like let the ego side just like, okay, I have to let this go forward, or else I'm not gonna
What was it like
be
for you to figure that out?
it was tough because like it's something that goes kind of against my nature in a certain aspect. Like I've always, you know, growing up, like you want to be good at what you're doing, and I was always big about competing against myself. I very rarely was like looking at other people and like, oh, I got to be better than that guy, like, I- you know, and comparing myself one on one. But it was always like I see what somebody else is doing. Oh, I could do that. I just got to figure out how to do it. And if I didn't do it, I was pissed at myself and trying to figure out how I can get to that point. Um, and so for me, it wasn't like it was uh, like I just had that innate confidence. And so when I kind of had that conversation, because it was something I had with my dad, he was like, you know, you're a nice kid, and that's great, but like at some point, you're gonna have to tap into a character if you want to get to the next level or compete at a certain level. So then I was like, damn. So that was kind of hard to sit with. Is like, do I have to now pretend I'm something I'm not? And it's like, no, you just have to get to play the character that might be a little different than who you feel you are, but you know that's in there. And so then it kind of became like a fun thing because it almost felt like I could play a role of like, all right, I gotta be this dude that's got confidence and knows that he's gonna dominate this. And then you start pairing it with the work that you're doing, you start getting good at it. That builds confidence from that side. Then you kind of put the role in your head, and then before you know it, you feel like you're at the level that you should be competing at. So it was kind of like a weird um like realization because at first you're like worried, damn, am I gonna have to be different? But it's like no, you just kind of pair the two together. Um, so that's kind of I guess how I went about it.
It's hard to feel like you're becoming someone you're not, and it sounds like that's what that was like for you, where you're worried like that's not who I am, and you're like going out of your comfort zone to phrase it that way, or there's like a dissonance there between the way you perceive yourself and what you think you're supposed to be, and then you start to like it's easy to get into a loop with that. Um, how old were you
No,
at this point?
for sure. I was probably uh, maybe 11 or 12 at this point. Um, and yeah, like at first it did feel like, okay, like I said, like it was almost like pulling a different person out. But looking back, it was just like pushing myself, like, um, like pushing the boundaries of what I was capable of. It wasn't like I had to change who I was or anything like that. It felt like it, like at that time, it felt like, oh, do I got to be someone different? But it wasn't. It was just, all right, how can I push this to get out of my comfort zone to now perform at a certain way? And then it just is. It's almost like, okay, we'll take what things that you do have about yourself and kind of amplify that to fit that persona. And that's what I started learning when I started getting a little bit older and it started making more sense. So like I get to college and it was like I'm not an asshole in general, right? But maybe there's
You are
something
the least
within.
asshole person I've ever met.
Right. So like that it doesn't fit, and a lot of people will tap into that as an athlete and that serves them really well. Like I got to be aggressive, I got to be like more in your face, I got to talk shit and that'll help certain players. For me, that was just never it. So it's like, okay, so how do I take who I am at my core and take those traits that make me me and then but kind of push towards that ego. And so like it was the fun side, which it sounds kind of weird, but like I'm just gonna have more fun than you. And when I'm having fun, I'm usually hitting doubles and homers, and you're gonna feel it. So like to me, that was like me being mean, which doesn't sound mean at all, but it works. Like it took what I had as a person, and it like elevated the thing that I can do and enjoy, and pushed it to where like the ego should be, the confidence should be, but in my own way. So I was never doing it in like flexing and yelling at the other team. I was doing it and like just like having fun with it, and it filled up that space of what it was supposed to with the ego, I guess.
What were some things that told you this strategy that you had taken up was working?
Just seeing the success and feeling that I was feeling more confident and like playing to my capabilities. Like at first, when you're trying to figure something out, maybe you don't have as much confidence, you're struggling, you don't really quite have it down, and then once you start to get the rhythm of it, then you start to pair it with like what I was saying with the ego, and then before you know it, like you just have this feeling when boom, you hit a double, and it's like that didn't happen by chance. Like we all know what it feels like when you hit a double and like holy shit, like I got a double, and then the
That's so
feeling of when
relatable.
like you hit it, when you hit, yeah, and you
You stand
know
on
what it
second
feels
base, you're
like.
like, I got lucky there.
Like how did that happen? You're like praying, but then there's other times where you hit a double and it's like I knew that was gonna happen. And so like you have more moments of that where it's like I knew that was gonna happen. And then and that's how it's like, okay, I know what I'm thinking and how I'm preparing behind it is starting to make sense. Let's just kind of keep going down that route with it.
Yeah, and so
And
the
It's
reason why I
it's
bring
always
that no, I was
no, go
just going
ahead.
to say the reason why I bring that up too is because there are definitely certain behaviors that are encouraged by the people around you too, whether it's teammates, coaches, parents. So was there any sort of pushback to this approach that you had had to the game, or were you seeing more encouragement to be that way in regards to feeding this ego side of yourself?
Well, I think it was more internal than anything. So like getting a lot of, I guess, external feedback from it was a little bit more difficult. Obviously, when you start performing well, you're getting certain feedback from coaches and players. So anytime that, you're doing something positive on the field and you're getting the feedback from that, that's just gonna, ignite the fuel to keep doing whatever you're doing or thinking whatever you're thinking. So I guess in that aspect, um, but I don't think it was specifically like I was telling everybody like, hey, like I'm gonna start playing this role. and then I go out and do it, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, like keep doing that role because that's working for you." It wasn't like that. It was just the performance was kind of speaking for itself, and so I think you just start, you know, embodying that or continuously doing that because you see the success on the field, you feel it from the teammates and the staff, and so that's just like, okay, I think that's the right way to go about it. And what I was gonna say prior to the question was just like it's experimentation. Like I feel like a lot of really like life in general, you're kind of experimenting. Kyle, you alluded to it as far as like doing something and feeling like, okay, maybe that's not it. Let's, reroute and try to figure it out. It's all kind of experimentation. So, a lot of this was just like trying to figure myself out, trying to figure out myself as a player, and then certain avenues seem to work. So you kind of just ride with it.
It's so interesting that yes, you were willing to change, and there was something you identified that okay, like this is a way for me to improve. It's uncomfortable, but I'm going to try. But I love that you found a way to do it that was just a better expression of you.
Mm.
Where I've never heard someone say it like that. Like I was just trying to have more fun.
Right.
But not like at least not you, your personality. You're not up there like, I'm hitting ground balls past the second baseman and throwing my bat 10 feet in the air and like dancing at first when like that's not for you like what you were doing, but you found a way to be Taylor, like an exaggerated like niche but like better version of Taylor in that moment, which had to feel good and also like you. Which I mean, being in that mental state is I can't think of something better for performing well.
Yeah. And that wasn't even like something I don't think I really put together all the way when I did start figuring it out. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure that out now. Like when I'm doing things that don't seem to be working for me, taking a step back after a while and being like, okay, does this match even like how I operate, or am I seeing somebody else do this and I'm trying to do it like them, or like I see somebody else being successful this way, so I feel like I need to do it this way, and then I seem to fail or whatever, and then I have to take a step back and be like, okay, but does it even operate the way like I operate? Am I trying to do something or be something that I got to find another avenue? And I think when I did figure that out, um, like early on, I don't think that even really clicked as far as like, oh, I just got to like do things like me. I just knew that that was the only way I could do it. Like I can't get angry. Like I can't just like sit there and like get pissed off at somebody easily. Like some people can do it. Somebody looks at them the wrong way and all of a sudden they want to fight. And that's easy for some people. I can't get that. So I got to figure out a way to, like I said, fill that space in a different way. So now I'm still learning that concept with things that I fail at now. So it's all kind of coming full circle, I guess you could say.
It's not a
All an
process that
experiment.
necessarily ends,
Right.
especially if you're doing different things in different stages of life. Like
Sure.
you learning how to compete better as a 13-year-old is a new thing for you. And then being in the high school and being with players that are older, and then you go to college, that's a completely different environment. And then, you get in the pro ball or you get into the real world, and then you start coaching instead of playing it like um, you have a serious relationship or not, like different things. You'll have different stages and you're kind of like, I'm not really sure what to do. And you look to, hopefully you look to good examples and you find someone that's you look up to or they have qualities about them that you like and you try to copy a little bit and see
Hmm.
what goes on. And it all circles back to eventually it will be original to you, but you've tried a bunch of different things. And I'm reminded of the interaction we had with Bobby Bell, who's a double A hitting coach with the Astros, who's been in the game for decades. And I've never seen someone at the pro level have players just love and hug a man as much as this guy. And Taylor and I were asking him a lot of questions, often, but in one afternoon in particular, we were just like, how do you handle this situation with a different guy? Or, how do you balance something he does well is he'll absolutely love players, like hug them, have really, really close interactions with them. But then he'll also like yell at grown men and tell them, get your shit together. Like he balances that really well,
Hmm.
where it's like this love lead dynamic. But so Taylor, you and I were asking him some questions, and like, how do you handle this? How do you balance this? What's important here? Just picking his brain, and something he said to us, he was like, "Who you are and what you're about is enough." And it sounded cliche at first, but then I think what we realized was like, no, like he's realizing that at whatever we end up trying, the thing that's most natural to us will be the thing that is what's required. It's kind of what you're getting to. So it was cool. I just thought of that again after hearing you talk through that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I learned a lot of that even just on this trip that I took. Like when you communicate with people, just like through, like you said, love first. Like if you're trying to communicate with somebody with the intention of like, I'm just trying to connect with you, I'm just trying to find a way to understand you so we can get on the same wavelength. It seems like the information flows so much easier and so much better regardless. And it almost doesn't matter what you're talking about or what, like if there's a problem that you're trying to solve or what. And I think that applies, directly to coaching. Like if I'm trying to help a player solve a problem, like if I'm thinking like somebody else trying to get to that, I'm already losing because I'm not allowing the gateway of that information to flow because I'm not coming at it through a place of love because how can I love acting like somebody else? And that's another thing that I'm like learning. Like if I'm trying to connect with a player, I got to do it through like a place of like compassion, right? You gotta do it like almost like you're having a conversation about like something intimate or like something that it goes beyond just a baseball issue or a swing issue. You know what I'm saying? And so like I think that like pathway like opens up a gate and the flow of information, whether it's actually solving the problem at the time or not, I think it's a huge like it's a huge win. And a lot of times I think we probably all felt this at some point. You might have that conversation with a coach or even a player and you're trying to solve something. It doesn't seem like you solved it at the time, and then like down the road, all of a sudden that like conversation comes back in your head because you experience something again, and it's like, oh, and then it all makes sense. And I feel like if you're trying to attack it in a way where, again, like you're trying to do it the way somebody else is doing it, that gateway is never open, and information just doesn't flow the same way.
Yeah, Kyle and I talk about this concept a lot in regards to trust. If you've developed a certain level of trust with that player, whether it's through, I mean, I can't tell you how many kids that I train, and I talk about like video games or what they like to eat, those kinds of things, relate to them on different levels, or just being like for example, I train these two brothers. I train them every single week, like twice a week, something like that. And I do catching lessons with them. They're great kids. I love their dad. Old school guy. Raised his sons the right way for sure. But the older son and the younger son are completely different. Like the older son is a guy who he'll yes coach, he'll run through a freaking brick wall for you, and his younger brother is like, why? You know what I mean? So when I first, it's exciting for me because, like I mentioned to the father a while ago, the best part about your sons being different is, guess what? I don't need to treat them the same. You don't have to treat your players the same. This idea that, you treat every player that you coach the same is just, I'm so out on that concept. You have to treat people differently because people are different. They operate differently. They respond to different things, you know. And I am the way I am now. But what these two kids don't understand is when I was a player, I was not how I am. I was very intense when I played. I was a hell of a competitor. I was very intense. I wanted to win no matter what. Like I'll freaking scratch tooth, nail, and claw to try to pull out a W. And the reason why I bring that up is because the younger son, when he messes up, he gets pissed. And I personally, it's like what you said earlier, Taylor. I like it. I like when he gets angry. I like when he gets a little bit emotional because I know that he cares. But what we've had discussions about time and time again was, hey, time and place. There's a useful time for that energy, but right now when we're trying to learn a way to make an adjustment in a movement to receive a pitch, that's not going to help you, right? So it took me a little bit of time with the younger son, but when I was able to relate to him on certain levels, now when I say something like, "Hey, listen, now's not the time to crash out and go absolutely crazy right now. Now is the time to be a little bit curious." So what we talked about was this concept of, and this is for my hotheads out there, I love you guys, but when you're feeling that anger or when you're feeling that frustration, just give yourself a second and ask yourself why, right? Because when you make a mistake and you just focus on, oh my God, I suck, I can't do this, whatever, this, that, the other thing, you're missing out on 50% of the information. You're missing out on the why, right? So when that type of mistake happens and he says why to himself, I literally watch it and it's fascinating because now he messes up a rep, whether he boxes a ball or he misses something, he misses a block, and you see him take a second and he's back in it, and it's just so cool to see. But when I tell you, I train them both over the span of an hour, so I have the older or younger first. When I go back to back with them, it's like I'm in completely, for myself too, I'm in completely different gears when I approach coaching the older son versus the younger son. But you know, there's usefulness. There has to be awareness, and like I just said before, there has to be a certain level of trust, which I developed with both of this guy's sons, both of the brothers. I developed that trust with them, and to Kyle's point, like I can really say whatever it is that I need to say to them now. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because they know that it's coming from a place of, like you said, Taylor, it's coming from a place of compassion. They know that I care about them. They know that I want them to do better. They know that I know that they can do better. So I can say what I need to say to them in the moment to help them because they know that it comes from a good place.
Yeah. What's that process like when you're identifying the player and how to approach them in different styles? Like you're saying, the one kid, he looks up to authority and you say something right away and he's like, "Yes, coach." And the other one wants to create that friction like we talked about earlier and wants to push back a little bit. What's the process like of identifying that and going about attacking like each player?
Um, First of all, I think that it's important to understand why it is that they're like that. For me, I would say for most coaches, first off, like don't take it personally. You know what I'm saying? I feel like we reward that yes coach, no coach behavior because it's respectful and it's good. But then on the other side of things, and listen, I'm not saying that being a prick is a good thing. You know what I mean? But we're talking about kids right now. We're talking about guys that are trying to learn the game. This kid comes to me twice a week, every single week since like the end of November or something. He wants to be there. He wants to learn. So when he's meeting me with some sort of intensity or anger, I'm not sitting there like, oh, this fucking kid doesn't want to be here. I'm like, this guy obviously wants to be here. He enjoys himself. I know he loves to catch. I know he loves to play baseball. So that's what I have to understand first and foremost is he's not taking a shot at me. He's not questioning my authority, even though I do actually prefer people to question those kinds of things. I like when that stuff is questioned. But I recognize the fact that he wants to get better. Okay, so now we got to find some common ground. Hey, this is what's happening. Do you feel that that's what's happening? No? Okay. Um, Tell me what you feel. And then I start to ask more questions. I start to be more curious of what he feels, what it is that he feels he needs to do. Okay, once I know what he's trying to do, then I can say, we'll try it this way. And if it works, that's great. I gain a little bit of a point there in regards to his trust. He can now say, okay. You give him a little something, it works a little bit. All right, that's cool. That works. Cool. Now I can trust him if something else comes down the line and he makes another suggestion. And I'm not trying to give him quick little fixes, just simple things, concepts. And then we might take a second and talk for a couple minutes and say, hey, listen, when guys are struggling, I say this to almost every kid that I train. When guys are struggling to make an adjustment, there's either a lack of understanding or there's a lack of mechanical execution. And most of the time it's a combination of the two. So sometimes we need to talk about it. So then once I've established that, then I can say, hey, what is it that you're feeling? So for that kid who does not have the yes coach, no coach, when you start to give them some responsibility, when you start to ask them questions about what they do, all of a sudden their approach starts to shift in a more, not, I won't say yes coach, no coach type of way, but they have a little bit more ownership of it. They don't feel so out of control. And that's something that I've noticed and I can relate to is when I got the angriest because I was a little bit of an angry I was a little bit angry myself when I was younger was I was angry because I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was angry about striking out or hitting a fly ball or rolling over because I don't know why the hell that I did that. So once I kind of started to make that connection that these guys are angry because they don't know what's going on, and we start to approach that in like an educational way, they calm down a little bit. They become more curious, and then they find it easier to make adjustments.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on that, Taylor. You said like, what's your question was what's your process like with those different guys? I think your process is figuring out what their thought process is.
Yeah.
As Dwayne said, it's like and it's easy to do that with time, and you get more examples. I shouldn't say that because that it's easier with time is kind of a passive thing. If you're paying attention and you're listening intently and you're watching how they observe and you're paying attention to body language, you're paying attention to the kinds of things that they say or ask, or what types of things cause them to respond a certain way. When you're really like cued in on those, and then you pair that with asking them, they ask you a question, what do you see there? And if it's like if you're doing that with a new player's asking you that, like, hey, what do you see? It's the ego part is like, oh, they're testing me to see what I know. Let me show them what I know. But really, that's an opportunity to be like, like just throw it right back on them. Not to avoid the question, although sometimes it's to avoid the question, but to be like, hey, like what are you feeling there? Like I don't know, like it's okay. Like, how's it feel? And they might say like oh, it's terrible. I feel off. And then again, you could then tell them what you think the answer is, or you could be like, well, what's it like when you're feeling right? Or they could say like those feel great, and if you thought they didn't look good, but they think they're great, like now's not the time to tell them how to get better with it because you're shooting. So I guess the point I'm dancing around is you need to know what their thought process like how they respond. With more time, you can get better at that, but it's a very active thing. Where
Hmm.
like to Dwayne's point, like if you understand why they're frustrated because they don't know what's going on, then okay, let's focus there. Or I'm working with a young Taylor and he doesn't, he seems like he's always just happy and like I'm not sure if he's competing enough or like, okay, well, like why is that? And try to figure out where they're at so then you can help them on their next step. Either because you've walked that yourself and that those are players that are easy to help because you can really identify with them. And if they're players that are struggling with something that came easy to you, that you didn't have to necessarily work and figure out, then like, okay, I need to understand, where they're at. And there's also not a pressure. And I've learned this even in a private section or private sector where you're doing a 1 hour lesson. Even during that 1 hour lesson, there's really not a need for you to have it figured out right then. Um, so it's like just being patient with it. And it's easier to do with a client that's coming consistently and they're going to come next week. And it's very easy to do at the pro level or the college level during the season when you're seeing them tomorrow whether they want to come or not. Like
Hmm.
so then there's not this you don't have to get it fixed day 1 or even day 20. You got time with it.
Yeah, it's probably one of the more important things I learned from UKB was like we don't always have to have the answer for them right now. Like you feel, at least for me, coming into coaching right away, it was like player asks me a question, I should have an answer for them. And it's like, nah, like walk the path with them and allow them to find the solution. And you're just, you know, being there as service to them to help guide them for them to find it. So I feel like a lot of the questions we ask, we kind of already know the answers to. We just need somebody to like ask ourselves the questions enough to pull it out of us. Um, and it kind of goes back to like I don't know if I did a great job of explaining the whole like information flowing back and forth, but like we have that within us, and it's almost like we need to pass it along or like have these conversations like on these podcasts where like we're moving it around to
I was actually
where,
going to ask you about that. I didn't want to interrupt you earlier because you were still
yeah.
going down a good thought, but um, you're right. It's within us, like you said, to love first, to have um, that connection, and it's easy to do it with someone that you trust and you know well. To be like, hey, what's going on? And you're immediately kind of on the same page. And I've learned with myself that it's also easy to do with a complete stranger in an area where you're not really concerned about others' perception of you. Um, I think I told you what I went to a wedding. Actually, believe it or not, it was an Indian wedding. It was in Canada, but it was an Indian wedding, and I knew obviously my friend that was getting married and like his parents and his fiance, or but I didn't know anyone else, and it was easy for me to just connect with them because I was like on vacation, I'm on a wedding, and it was like a fun time, and everyone's all happy, and then we have a thing in common, so it was easy to do that first. So like complete stranger at a positive event, easy. With someone you know, easy. But then with someone that you're kind of familiar with, working with, like it's the question I'm getting at is why do you think it's hard for us to be that way?
Mm, I don't know. I think maybe it does go back to what we're talking about a little bit with the ego. Um, like we want to say the right things or like present ourselves in a certain, proper way, or maybe we were conditioned when we were younger to, say the things this way and avoid confrontation this way or what have you like that. So I don't know if that's what we then look to when we try to have this conversation, especially when it comes to having conversations with new people. And we just kind of let our egos get in the way where it makes it difficult to just connect without having any worry of how they're going to think or react to what I'm saying.
I think what you said in the beginning that I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to say that. I think I've said that so many times to players is sometimes as a coach you don't know. You don't know the answer. Sometimes you're watching a guy swing and you're like, I don't know why the hell he's doing that. You watch a guy struggling on the mound. I don't know. I don't know why he's doing that. I think that's so powerful to be able to say as a coach. And something I think you can say is, hey, I don't know, but we could figure this out together. Or I don't
Mm,
know, but we could get somebody else and bring that community aspect into it. That flow and sharing of ideas. It can be opened up with an I don't know. But I think so many times as a coach, you feel inclined to have an answer, like you described when you first started out. I felt the same way when I first started coaching. Yeah, you got to do this. You got to do this. You want to give that feedback.
mhm,
Because for me, I got into coaching because I wanted to get this information that I felt was gonna get these guys to get similar experiences to myself. Because college baseball for me was an incredible experience, but I remind kids of that a lot. Sometimes a coach feels inclined to say an answer. And if you find coaches not saying things like they don't know the answer, like, dude, don't come over to me and ask me about how to field a ground ball. I stopped playing third base when I was like 13, 14, 15 years old. I haven't played the infield in over freaking almost like 12, 13 years. Don't ask me how to field a ground ball. I think saying that I don't know kind of brings that back too and says, wow, this guy's actually a person as well, you know?
Yeah,
yeah, for
that
sure.
I, I want to go back to something you said of you were learning to. It's like what is the purpose of coaching? It's you want the player to figure it out on their own
Mm-hmm.
because then it's there, or you want them like you would love for them to figure it out on their own around you because then you get to witness it. But really, what you want is for them to have the skill set to figure it out on their own. So if that's the goal in mind, and if that's what's really important, the way, like if that's your North Star, the way you go about it's a lot different. Your timetable is different. The questions you
Hmm.
ask is different. Um, so I think that's uh, I appreciate you saying that. That's something you've learned from me, but that's something I've learned just from kind of going through it the wrong way for a bit, especially early on in pro ball. Because it's one thing to be like, hey, I played Division 1 baseball, I did this, whatever, and I'm working with some 14-year-old who looks at me like I'm Superman, and I know what he needs probably, so just tell him, and like that's rewarding. But then you get in the pro ball, and you guys you're working with, or they're playing at a higher level than you did. They're almost the same age. They don't have to listen to you. So when they ask you, hey, what you see here, you think like I got to prove myself to them, and then, but then you realize that that's not the good stuff. Like that's not the rewarding part. You want them to figure it out. You want to ask them questions that will open up something that's already within them. And if when you look at it that way, when someone's struggling in front of you, and I think this is something in our relationship last year that was apparent to me was, and it was easy because so people know you were the coach of the complex team, the rookie ball team. I was that was also my title, but really more so what I did was work with the rehab players, and I was kind of there as like an extra set of hands for you and someone to bounce ideas off of. But I wasn't at many of the games, so when guys struggled, I wasn't there with them as they were struggling, and I also wasn't like my skin in the game as much. So I had a bit of a I was close enough to know what was going on, but disconnected enough to not feel like the emotional pulse of it. When someone was struggling, it's so easy, especially if you're a coach who cares about, you want the best for your guys. It's easy when they're struggling to want that to stop. And obviously that's their job is to make the struggles less and the success to, the highs to last longer and the lows to be quicker. Uh, but when guys are struggling through that, you want to help, you want to give them a quick fix, you want to have the answer. And it's hard, especially when, their success matters or their success or not affects their career. As a pro player, there are few instances when your career is not close to being over if things don't go the right way. But like really what you want is if this player eventually wants to get to the big leagues, if they want to be able to figure this out or have the skill sets to figure this out, then they kind of need to go through this and they need to learn something from it. And I want to be there to help them with that process so that way when they come on the other side, they don't need me for the next one as much. So it's
100%.
it's just a different perspective, and it's not it's something I've learned through I guess doing it wrong, to be honest, and then seeing what it's like
Hmm.
to do it that way.
And it's a little bit of a paradox too, because like you said, when the player is going through that struggle, we immediately want to help them to get them out of that. But a lot of time it's like that period of struggle is actually what's going to benefit them down the road so much further. Like we had a player this year who high capabilities, really good player, and he struggled for a good bit. And I know it was tearing him up, it was tearing the staff up, and eventually it got to the point where you just, all right, you got to slow everything down, you got to accept it for what it is, and then you start to rebuild and start to work. And I think at the end of it, not that I think, I know because we had the conversation, the player would be like, you know, if I didn't go through this struggle, I wouldn't have the confidence to know that like when I do struggle, I can now bounce out of it and I know how to do it. I just got to slow things down and know what to focus on and know what I got to work on and not blow things out of proportion. And I think because he goes through that struggle, it's probably going to be something that now it's going to pay dividends so much farther down his career because we know he's a good player. We know he's going to be around for a while. But now when that happens again, it's not panic mode. Like he's been through that period. He's
And
known.
also, what's really really cool is that lesson that he's learned, that experience he's had. You were the reason you were there when he had it, and you were part of the reason that he felt that way coming out of it.
Mhm.
Where you don't have the opportunity to do that if you're constantly just trying to put a band-aid on and fix the thing, or you just want him to like you and that sort of thing. Like he'll remember the struggle,
Mhm.
but the lesson from it and who was there for that lesson is like you've earned that, and that's a really cool thing. And it's I think that the older and the wiser you get as a coach, and I see this in older, more successful coaches, is they'll see that light at the end of the tunnel, or at least they know like that's what the player's going to learn from this, even though right now it sucks. They can keep that perspective during it, which I think for a younger slash less experienced coach, or just someone who, when you really care about the guys, it's you don't have that. Like it's hard to zoom out and see like
Mhm.
what's really going on.
Right. How do you guys, now that you guys have had some good experience with coaching, how do you like keep the composure yourself as a coach when you know a player's really going through it? 'Cause I know that's one thing I felt right away was like you feel what the players are feeling, right? Like you know when a player is struggling, you feel that with them. So how do you go about keeping your composure so that you can pass along the right information or be that guide that you need to be with that player who is struggling?
I mean, I think it goes along the same vein that Kyle was just describing. You are aware that it will end, like that struggle will end. And the worst case scenario is it will end in the form of the season ending. You know what I'm saying? So like worst case scenario, they
Hmm.
don't quote unquote figure it out, but the season's over and now it's time to get into if they have another season, like to use college baseball as an example, if they're not a senior and they can come back, then it's time to gonna go into workshop mode and fortify that confidence and the mechanics or whatever. But if it's mid-season and you see that it's not something all too glaring, just first step I think for me is just calming them down. Getting their focus on not because I feel like you start to mess up and then the ego thing kicks in a negative way. I suck. I'm letting my team, whatever it is, whether it's on an individual level that they're not performing the way they think they should be performing, they're not going to be, they're going to lose playing time, they're disappointing a family member or a coaching staff. It could be anything or a combination of everything I just described, and maybe even some things I didn't mention. So once you can kind of get them to calm down a little bit and get to see, like, hey, maybe it's just that you're not getting your foot down on time. And you take a look at some video, take a look at some, like, we had a guy struggling last year actually, and one day we just happened to be on the bus going to an away game, and we're like looking at the stats of the team, and I'm like, dude, this guy's fucking hitting over 300 with a couple homers and stuff. But if you would have talked to him around the cage, you would have thought it was the end of the world. Because, yeah, he was striking out a good amount of the time. Like, he was striking out more than he normally does. And he was pissed about that. And we didn't even realize that as a staff because we're like, damn, like, so, like, he's kind of struggling, damn, whatever. And then we're sitting on the bus, and me and one of the other assistant coaches were like, dude, he's fucking hitting like 330. Like, he's hitting 330. He's got a couple homers. Like, he's really not doing bad at all. Like, it was kind of crazy. So we brought a little bit of awareness, be like, hey, listen, you're struggling right now, and this is what you're doing. Like, what does that say about you? You're a pretty damn good ball player if you can struggle and still pump these numbers out. So maybe framing some things in a different way. I always like to place emphasis on the fact that, hey, your effort is there. I like to put emphasis on the fact that the effort is there, that the work is there, your focus is there and stuff. And if it's not, we got to call attention to things like that. There's such an array of things to approach. But I think getting the focus off of the fact that you're a major disappointment either to yourself or others is the first step for me. And then maybe shining a light on what you mean to the team. Even if you're somebody who's not an upperclassman leader type, you are an important aspect to this team. You're important in my eyes. I like to give them that sense of confidence, saying, hey, you matter to me. Your struggle, I see it. I see your struggle. I see everything that you're going through. Me personally too, I've experienced a struggle like that, like we all have in this game. So I want to seem a little bit relatable, and then maybe give them a little bit of time. Give them a little bit of time to mull that over on their own after that awareness is there, because you don't want to make something bigger than it has to be. And if it's something where they've gone through like maybe a bad 20 at bats, hey, listen, you went through a bad 20 at bats. I see where you're at. I get where you're at. Your defense looks pretty good though. Your hustle's there. Your effort's there. Let's freaking roll it out there tomorrow and see what happens. Because the last thing you want to do is kind of like make that problem bigger for them. You don't want to be the reason why they're freaking out more. You know.
The thing I keep thinking of is Usually when someone's struggling, it's because they're so focused on the results or things beyond their control. And then the adjustment they're going to have to make, although sometimes it might be physical or an approach thing, like they need to have a good habits, a mindset, like a way about them. And I think as a coach and leader, like that's where your focus needs to be is the quality of the types of things that they're doing. Um, so like first you have to make sure those are good. And if they are, and the player's struggling, then it doesn't mean like, oh, like it'll just get better because our process is good, and sort of being hands off. But like if you're thinking as a coach, if you're so focused on the results, the players are going to see that and then they're going to feed off of it. And if the results aren't good and they're struggling, they're looking to you and you're not doing well because of the results. Like it's just, it makes for a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And the game's a roller coaster, anyways. So I guess focusing on like what are you doing to improve upon it,
Yeah.
and also it's the duration matters too, and like what the players like. I could think of guys, won't name names, of course, that's not important, but like guys that we both know that I've worked with, where they'll come in and they'll have a bad day, and um, I've had guys take a bat, people that I think really highly of will take a bat and be pissed, and they're not doing well, and the things I'm telling them aren't helping, and they've slammed the bat and broken a brand new $100 bat in front of me, not because they're mad at me, but they're just mad, and by the time we've picked up the balls, they're saying, "Hey, thanks for today," and tomorrow they come back and they're great. And I've had other guys where they start to be a little bit off, and I'm like, "Uh oh, here comes a 2 week out." And so the one that is going to snowball, then you maybe try to find ways to micromanage that, or with that type of player, you try to focus on things that are positive or do something that's easier, and you're trying to float that. And the guy that just blew up in front of you and slammed the bat and is mad, like yeah, that happened today. That sucks. He'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's nuanced, but focusing on the quality of their work and what they're trying to do and the adjustments they're trying to make and where their awareness is and what their mental state's right, like what their habits are like, how they are with their teammates, like all the makeup things. It's like if your focus is on that, what's the practice environment like? Is it organized? Are guys making quality work? Is the intensity appropriate for the time of day or what we're doing? Did they, is this player young and early in their career and they have a while before they really need to perform? Are they working on the good things right now? If they're doing that for the long term view, like okay, they're doing what they should. I know they're not happy today, but like they're on the way to learn some lessons. Um, it kind of context dependent, but that's the way I tend to think about it. So when you have that view, it's easier to weather the little spikes. Um, Having said that, if we were coaching big leaguers or at a college level where you have to win today and you have to handle guys through that, then it's a more nuanced thing that I'm not sure I'm prepared to speak on. But um, in a practice youth, like not near the end of the road standpoint, that's the way I think about it.
One thing I learned while I was playing from some guys that were really good, the ones that like separate themselves are the guys that like when they do struggle, they find ways to maximize the things that are still going well for them. So like if I can't hit, like I'm missing everything or I just can't find a barrel to save my life, can I celebrate when I fist something and it loops in, or like can I work a count to where now I'm walking a ton more? Maybe I'm not hitting anything, but like I'm gonna be selective and work counts where I'm now starting to walk more. Or like on the other side of the game, going out and playing great defense. We see it so many times where like a player will struggle hitting and then it like bleeds into everything else. The defense starts falling apart and just everything becomes a mess. So it's like, can I amplify the things that I am doing well or do have control over? So can I go out and play good defense and focus on that? Can I go run the bases really well and focus on that? And then maybe that might actually even just start bleeding back into the hitting side. Now all of a sudden, because I'm focused and doing things well, maybe the bat's not there, but now I let those things amplify and sooner or later that starts to manifest in hitting. And I'm sure that applies to really anything. I'm sure on the coaching side, maybe you're doing something that's, not the way you want it. Okay, let's really lean into the things that I'm doing well. And then before you know it, maybe that starts to push that energy, that good energy into the thing that's not going well or whatever in life. I'm sure there's a ton of things where like maybe I just, you know, did something tough with a friendship or something and now I need to lean into other aspects that like regroup to get that energy moving forward again and start getting back on track to what success looks like.
I think I saw a post yesterday where Tommy Pham talked about like how to create longevity in his career or his advice to people to create longevity in their career, and he talked about similar concepts where you need to make sure that the other parts of your game are elite. The other parts of your game are celebrated as well, in order to make yourself more valuable, which I think is super important. Something I wanted to bring up too is you talk a lot about, well, you've mentioned a couple times like the energy and flow and stuff. It's something that you can definitely feel, whether it's an individual, the type of energy they bring into the clubhouse in a positive way or a negative way. When you're experiencing, and you could speak to this either as a player or a coach or as both, but what are some things that you feel you needed to do or need to do now as a coach to get yourself in that good energy, like to get yourself like kind of operating at a high frequency, at a high level?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a coach, I think that stems a lot from just having conversation. That's what I'm learning a lot about myself is like when I have a conversation with a player, that usually starts to put me in a good headspace and a good mindset to now I'm operating at a frequency that I want to operate at when I'm on the field with the players. As a player, there's a bunch of different things. You could listen to music or whether that's just like having an easy session in the cage where you're building that confidence and feeling good. I think anything that like it seems like it kind of is going back to this concept, but anything that like fits who you are as a person or individual that like amplifies that good energy. I know sitting and having conversations with people that always uplifts me. It always makes me feel good. So try to implement that into my coaching with my players. I know obviously we talked about building relationships. I'm having conversations that have nothing to do with baseball with my players. That's probably a good thing because now I'm building a relationship. So now it's working in two parts. It's kind of amplifying that frequency that I got, and then it's building a relationship with the player. So I think at the end of the day, just leaning into things that you know fit you and your personality. Maybe it's going and reading. I know like a lot of people just want to sit in a quiet place, get their thoughts together, or turn their thoughts off and just read a book. Maybe that gets you in the right mindset. I think that goes into a lot of figuring out who you are and how you go about uh, your business. Um, Music is another big one I kind of mentioned on, but like maybe before practice or whatever, I'm listening to certain music, and that gets me in the right headspace.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that you're prioritizing yourself first and getting yourself squared away, whatever that looks like, so that way you're can be the best version of you that you have for that day with your guys, and then you can bring that to them. It's also easier to handle the stuff that other people are going to have weighing on them when you're squared away a little bit on your own.
hmm
Um,
Yeah, if I'm
yeah,
out of whack, then whatever I'm trying to contribute is going to be out of whack. And it kind of sounds counterintuitive, like if I focus on myself, that's somehow going to help the greater group. But I think that's exactly how it works. Like we're our own little like microcosms. And if we're working on ourselves first, that's gonna then, all right, now I can be productive in the smaller group. Okay, now the smaller group focuses on their self. Okay, now through the whole organization is gonna feel that because you were focused on yourself in that smaller group. And it stems all the way back from you making sure that, you're working on yourself in your own space that's gonna be beneficial. And you can kind of forget that at times, especially if you're a person that wants to be about the group or vice versa. Like if you want to be about the group, sometimes you're focusing on the others so much that, bro, you're not really doing what you need to do to get yourself in the right space so that you can actually do that. Um, and so I think learning and understanding that about yourself is probably pretty important.
Yeah, you've got to lead yourself before you can lead someone else.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good
you know,
quote.
I like that you talk about. I remember exactly what you said, but basically, you need to this idea that you're going to put others first, and that's the problem I have with the concept of servant leadership. Is it's a nice idea, and there. I mean, listen, like the three of us have been talking. We're obviously serving the player. Like we care a lot about what the player's going through and what's best for them and the interactions with them and coming from a good place. Like we clearly care about them and we want what's best for them. So it's not to say that we don't serve them, but this concept that like the players are more important than me and I need to, I need to sacrifice myself for them. It's like, even if you do those things, the version of you that's going to show up is not going to be helpful. It might actually be counterproductive. It might actually be better if you
Mm,
weren't there than if you were there sleep deprived, like just out of balance. The things that get you right, for me, it's doing physical stuff in the morning. If I'm breathing heavy or sweating, or at least just like going through mobility and I physically feel well, then I can handle conversations. I'm a much better version of myself. So whether that's reading or music or whatever, showing up without those things, it's not going to, especially in positions like a previous guest had said, like the platform that we're on, the yeah, like the platform, the opportunity to have influence over others in whatever regard. If you're not portraying a good thing because you're so focused on helping the other people, then it's a net loss, in my opinion.
mm,
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, Kyle. Like I know, like Taylor, you had mentioned this too. Even something like having conversations like this, dude, like because I'm gonna get off this call and I'm gonna go to practice. I feel I feel like I'm in the right tune. I feel like I'm at the right frequency. I feel like I'm ready for whatever is gonna come my way that day because I'm having conversations like this. That's one thing because I'm like Kyle, I have a similar thing to Kyle where if I feel like I'm physically taking care of myself through exercise, through nutrition, I'm eating the right things, I'm staying hydrated, like I just feel like I'm operating at the right level to do my job to the best of my capabilities. So Kyle, I completely agree with with what you have to say there. And you kind of talked about something that we've mentioned before on a previous episode, but it's fluid. Sometimes you're going to be in a state where it's like I'm ready to go. I've been talking about these things. I'm geared up. I'm ready for this kind of a challenge. And sometimes like I want to observe. Like Cap said a couple weeks ago. Cap was talking about this. He's like sometimes I want to observe and sometimes I want to learn and sometimes I want to all right, let's see what this guy does. Let's see how this guy handles his day. Let's see how this guy goes about his work. And it also helps me create an understanding. Now I've watched this guy do work for a couple days now, and then I see him in a game. Is he successful? Yeah. Well, he just spent this amount of time because we got the iPads going this year, dude. We're super technological now. So I just watched this guy, take a couple rounds, watch himself on the iPad, kind of take in his swing a little bit. Maybe he talked to one of the hitting coaches. Maybe he talked to myself a little bit. Hey, what do you think about it? And then all of a sudden he gets into the game. His approach looks solid. Like it's like, yeah, okay. So now when he struggles, I can say, dude, remember this? You're capable of doing that. Let's get back to that, right? Let's get back to that. Okay, or maybe let's refine this a little bit. Or maybe he gets away from that and struggles. Like it's fluid, and I think when we're open to that idea that it's fluid, where sometimes it's going to be, all right, I got this, I'm loaded up, I'm ready to go. And sometimes I want to take that step back and watch guys. It all is to help you in those moments deal with these players and help them be successful or get them out of times where they're struggling a little bit. So that's a really important point there, Kyle. You got to kind of feed off the energy that you're providing for yourself and that you're generating yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's better to give a really good couple hours than to give 8 shitty ones. Like we're not quantifying time. It's the quality of what goes on, especially when you're in an environment where you're a college coach or high school coach or something when you're in season, where you're
Hmm.
going to be around players often. Like the quality is more important. The
Yeah.
things that are going to stand out and have outside of it, like the amount of things that we experience and forget because they're just not important. Like let's make the ones that we do forget that are strong enough good ones.
Hmm.
Put that on a T-shirt.
I was gonna say, Kyle, you had a bar in there. You said you got to lead yourself before you can
Yeah,
lead others. That was a
Yeah,
good one.
that's
I'm
going on a
gonna write that one
T-shirt,
down.
bro.
Yeah,
well,
I
that's not
mean,
original to me. The person I heard it from, I don't think it was original to them either. But it's like this step where like step one is to lead yourself well, because if whether you have no one that's you're in charge of, whether it's players or other staff members or whatever leadership that position you're in life, like you got to lead yourself well because you're you're not going to. Another guest we said your mindset is better caught than taught was the phrase that he said.
hmm.
And I almost don't like that it's a phrase because I'm not big on phrases. But it's true. Like
Here
you
you
are
are
around someone. Yeah, I know.
throwing
It's
phrases at us, bro.
I
Come
was gonna
on.
say you're kind of the master at it right
oh Jesus. It's you make me
He's
want
the
to.
phrase guy, bro.
Guys, I'm not doing the podcast no more. I'm becoming something I hate.
uh, lean
um,
into it. Lean into it.
but like someone with a good mindset, someone with a good work ethic, someone with a good way about them, like something that you admire in someone, you they might say the right things, but you like that because you've observed it in them, or you believe what they're saying because you've observed it in them. Like the same goes is true for leading anyone. So like step one, you got to do you're leading yourself, and then you could take someone else that's could be a teammate when you're 14 years old and you got someone else like hey let's stretch together like hey I'm doing this extra practice come with me. You kind of bring someone else along, and then you could have like a small group, and then the next phase, which is something that I think Dwayne and myself are getting into, is like we want to now start having a positive influence over people that have small groups of their own.
Mhm.
But you can't. That doesn't work if you're not squared away and you don't have good experiences with like one-on-one or small settings. So like coaching in a lesson or coaching a team, like you need to have that foundation set first. So this
Mhm.
idea that I've seen coaches do it at many different levels, but it's popular in pro ball because of the culture where I'm going to be up working on player reports until 8 p.m. and then I'm going to call my wife, and then 20 minutes later I'm asleep and I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be back on the computer, and then I'm going to be looking for the edge, and like people do that and they make a lot of progress with it, but they are destroyed during it, and then that in shambles version of them, even though it's well intentioned and super aspirational and like driven and the work ethic is good, they're showing up on fumes to the player. And not to say that working really hard is going to make you that way, because there are certain people that can handle that, but it's got to be like you want to be your best version because that's what you want of a player.
Mhm. Yeah, no, exactly. I think I've been I've been actually taking this class. It's there's like these online classes that the psychologist do you know Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's putting together like an online academy, and he's putting together like some of the best lectures in the world, and they're doing courses online. And so I've been actually taking a few of them. And actually, one of the ones that I'm taking is the greatest leaders of all time. It's like it's more of a history class than anything, and I'm not a huge history buff. I do find it fascinating, kind of like the secular like system that you see with like history repeating itself. So that kind of concept is interesting, but it is interesting listening and learning about some of these leaders and how they're able to captivate like large groups. A lot of these people are, Army generals or Navy generals. but yet sometimes at the individual level, it's kind of counterintuitive than what we're saying. At the individual level, they're not always what we'd consider like the greatest people. And so it's interesting trying to find, okay, what makes some of them tick and make them operate so well as leaders, even though there might be parts of them that we would look at from like maybe a moral or ethical standpoint and kind of question. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like guys that do know how to command, do know how to lead, bring a group
Right.
together, have a
Well, I
lot of
think
respect from people.
every leader and every person is going to have their own sets of strengths and weaknesses. Like
Hmm.
everyone, there are things you're good at and things you're not. Um, if you can operate from your strengths, the areas of you that are really good, like feed into those, and then the areas that you're pretty good at, like you want to get better at them. But the areas you're poor at, like you need to surround yourself with others that are good at those things. It goes into like more of a team dynamic. Like I don't think there's any one there's no person that is good at all these different aspects of what it would take to lead people. Um, you're going to have to be secure enough in yourself to surround yourself with the people that are good at those other things. And the reason I say secure is you need to be willing to give up, a certain amount of like power or control over something to let someone else who's better at it handle it. Um, that's where my
Yeah,
mind goes.
yeah. I was going to say something in the same vein as you, Kyle. Just being able to surround yourself with good people and then trusting them to do their job. Because it's one thing to put good people around you, but if you're not, I think some of the best leaders I've been around were good at delegating. Like they're good at delegating responsibility. For me, it's like if I was in a situation where I'm a head coach and I have an infielding coach, like I'm gonna go let him be an infielding coach because I don't know jack shit about. I mean, I'm exaggerating. I could tell you a little bit, but I'm not gonna tell guys the proper footwork and approach to fielding a ground ball. And I think the best I learned that from the best guys that I've been underneath because for me personally, they allowed me to do my job. So, and it's so interesting because it's like they give up some power to do that. They allow somebody else to deliver the message to the team. They allow somebody else to have a hand in the success or the failures of the team. Actually, I should say they'll almost own the failures more than the success. So they'll almost take more responsibility for the overall failures of the group and give more credit to the team and assisting staff when the success is there, which I've always found admirable. But I think what you're describing, Taylor, in regards to the military stuff, I mean, I'm not going to speak to this personally because I don't have experience in the military, but it definitely is a little bit more of a rigid structure in regards to, command and stuff like that and rank. It's definitely not, it's because I understand what you're saying, me being a big history buff. Sometimes you hear about these guys in these great battles and stuff and whatnot, and then they're like, actually, he was kind of a dick. So listen, I'm sure they accomplished some great things. Maybe the people around them didn't like them, but I still do stand by what I say. And I think the best do surround them, like Kyle said, with good people, and then I think to take it steps further, they delegate their responsibilities appropriately and allow the people that are essentially doing the work to make decisions. To bring that back to baseball, it's I'm trusting. Sorry, I'm trusting my guys when they're out there and they see something happening to make a change on the call. If there's a first and third play and I call this and then the ball is thrown down to second base and one of my infielders decides to cut the ball and throw it somewhere else, or my catcher sees the guy has an extended lead on third base and instead of throwing down to second, snaps it down to third base. Like you got to trust the guys that are in the moment doing all the work to be able to be comfortable enough to make those decisions on the fly and feel like they can do that they're not just a chess piece out there.
I've heard there's another concept, maybe works more in like employment, but I guess in in hiring coaches. So like you're the head coach at a college, for example, and you need assistants and whatnot. Where like put for example people in the three buckets. You have like an A, a B, and a C. The A is the best performer. The C is the lower one. You don't want like C's underperform. You don't want them in positions of leadership or really even on your team at all. B's often will hire a C employee because they want that person to be under them and they want to maintain that, like that sense of control or like not being at risk. Whereas an A employee, an A leader will want to hire other A's because they just want good things to be done and they're secure in themselves. Um, so it's like when you have a really, really good leader, they're going to want to be around someone who's also really good because they're not worried about losing to them. It goes back to like the whole ego thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and like you said, the security, um, whether that's, I guess it's like about themselves of look, I know that what I'm bringing to the table is gonna compete with whoever comes in here, so I don't have to worry about who I do hire. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could be in complete control and have total responsibility for the success of something small, or you can have a percentage of the success of something much larger.
Hmm.
Like the that's like the whole concept of like why leadership is an important thing. Because like you could create something really cool on your own and it could be worth a certain amount of impact or money or whatever. Or you could be a 10% owner because you have a big group of people, but what that group of people is going to do is going to far outweigh what you would have done on your own.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, so like you think of the impact of what like a good coaching staff can have, or a good organization could have with good leadership. You'll have someone that'll take some credit, or will be just given credit because they're in a leadership position, but it's because of all the really awesome stuff that happened. And the only
Hmm.
reason that all those awesome things happened was because there were really good people that were involved doing it,
Hmm.
rather than hoarding everything and kind of putting like a cap on yourself.
Yeah, no, that's good.
You guys want
Kyle,
to?
let's do a quick break.
Yep,
I
it's
gotta
that
piss.
time.
It's
Yep,
perfect time. I felt it.
yep. It happens every time.
Yes.
All right.
Sounds good.
Be right
Yep.
back.
I'm good. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how much I had to pee. I was drinking all the tea and the water intermittently, and you said take a break. I stood up and I was like, oh. Uh,
Yeah.
That's good. Yep.
you
Needed.
guys, you guys have podcasts that you guys listen to that kind of circulate around leadership or coaching, that kind of inspired this podcast?
I mean, a combination of a bunch. I mean, I for the conversation aspect, like listening to Rogan, the way that sounds like he's just talking to dudes. I think same thing with Sean Ryan. I think he does a pretty good job. I mean, I'm talking about dudes who have the best fucking podcasts in the world, but and saying he does a pretty good job. But I just like the way that they sound. For me, I also enjoy the lifestyle coaching thing, like Mel Robbins. You ever listen to her? You ever listen to any of
Hmm.
her
Yep.
stuff? I think that she does such a good job with life coaching and things like that too. So those are some inspirations for me personally, Kyle. I don't know if you had any others really.
Um, there's a few kind of like here and there. I'll find something and listen to it more like one-offs. I don't really follow a specific one. But if there's a certain guest that I really like, I'll listen
Yeah,
to them on when they're on one of yours because of the format.
yeah.
Mm.
And I know that it'll just be like I get to hear them just be them as much as you can be on that stage. And
I
my
listen to
favorite one,
Baseball is Dead too with Dallas Braden, and I just like listening to fucking Dallas Braden. I think that guy's nuts. I love
He's
listening
a
to him, bro.
character.
yeah. But no, my favorite episodes are when if someone has a really cool backstory when they talk about it, you're like, okay, like I'm in on
Mm.
this. Or when someone is just interesting or asks good questions and it's just actually a back and forth and not really like an interview, which
Hmm.
kudos to you
Yeah.
because that's how this has been from the get go. Which I'm not surprised because I know you, but that's not going to happen often when we do this. At least as first time with people. So
Yeah.
you're
Sure.
crushing it. But yeah, just to like actually have like just a talk that happens to be recording.
Hmm.
Those that type of environment, and I've said it to Dwayne before on other episodes where I feel like the most that I've learned, maybe not from a technical standpoint, but the most I've learned about coaching or just in baseball in general has come from just chats like this.
Hmm.
In the locker room or at lunch, or you got some time and you pick someone's brain on something eventually, and you just kind of get into it with coaches that are pro ball or not, that are more experienced than I am and that have done something I've wanted to do, or they think about it a different way that I admire. So I've learned so much from that, and then hearing the way they talk about stuff and getting to know how they think and how they made decisions and how they view things. And then, like you said earlier, like you pull different pieces of that and then you try it yourself and see what works. Or um, you can gain more experience from talking with people that have it, if that makes sense. So to have that type of a talk with someone like yourself or whoever we have on, and have other people be able to listen to it is what's really cool. Because when I come
No, for
back
sure.
after, and not to say like, oh, pro ball's got all the figured out and whatnot, because it's not just pro ball. But when I work with players and they think highly of me, I can't help but think like I've just found pieces from other people that I've been with that I'm bringing to you, and I'm the messenger from someone else. No, I'm
Yeah.
delivering it as me. It's my original thought, but like the reason they like me is because of who I've talked to.
Have you ever had an experience where you said something to a player and then you've had a chance? Because listen, me getting to coach with a guy who is a mentor to me as a player and even as a younger coach and still as a coach to this day, I've had this opportunity. But have you ever got the opportunity to have like a player that you said something to also experience the guy that you learned that from? If you know what I'm saying? You ever had something like that
I
happen?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't. Let me think.
I have not. I don't have like a profound like let me tell you this story, but yeah, it's been usually when there's two people that I have relationships with separately that I like, and when you get to see them. This is a perfect example, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
I, two people that I've had very in-depth, great conversations with are doing it. You know, I'm here, but like doing it without me in a sense of just it's cool.
It is
Yeah.
cool.
Another perspective, because I can't think of one like that right off the bat, but one where um, maybe a guy that I've played with uh, who's going through something. I guess it's kind of the same. And then a coach that I've had prior say something to them and seeing it click for them in their mind in the same way where I was like, oh, when I was a player, yeah, yeah. That happened actually this last spring where a guy was talking with someone that I had played with, and the coach would say something, and you could see like the wheels turning and things starting to make a little bit of sense. And I was like, damn, that's cool. I remember when he had that same conversation with me.
Yeah, that stuff's
Uh,
awesome. And
yeah.
I love when they also talk about because I've had this happen to me personally, but not on the level of somebody who's been doing it for 20 plus years. But when I've listened to older coaches talk about how when they hear their words repeated by other players, by other coaches, that pride that they have
Mm.
in that, like it's definitely a cool experience for them, and when they see things put into practice. But to hit back on a couple points we've touched on, like that doesn't happen if the person that's kind of projecting that message doesn't live as they speak, walk it like they talk it, so
Mhm.
to speak. So
Mm.
I
Yeah, it's a big
definitely,
distinction.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Got to be able to live it. It gives you that validity and it gives you that buying power with your players.
Mm.
Yeah,
It goes for
I
life too. I
I
feel
was
like
gonna
I've been
say
having
that's
more.
I experienced that myself with people that I seek advice from. It's because
Yeah.
they're in some way they're living, have lived, or there's a way about them that I know is real, and so I want their active take on it now because I
Yeah.
know like what they are, who they are.
Hmm.
I love drawing those connections and parallels from stuff outside of what we do, baseball coaching, and bringing that in to baseball coaching, whether it's, listening to somebody on a podcast that's not talking about anything related to baseball, but it kind of is because it talks about mindset and willfulness. Like everything is all connected. And I find myself, and
Mhm.
Taylor, I mean, I get this kind of vibe from you too, bro, but I feel like when you can bring that veil back to the players and say, hey, listen, I've been saying this so much lately. If you don't learn this skill now, you're going to have to learn it at some point in your life when baseball's not involved.
Mhm.
So, let's take some steps in that direction. Maybe stop having pizza and Coca-Cola all the time because, you're going to figure out in your mid to late 20s that your body's going to start being like, dude, what the fuck? Like, come on. So I
Yeah.
love making those parallels.
With the younger guys, one of the groups that I'm working with is 14-year-olds, and you realize that a lot of the stuff that you're having conversations with them about isn't even necessarily like the details of baseball. It's just like building habit,
It's
like
a
you
medium.
said, like yeah, like you're getting to a point where it's like, look, just this will apply to almost everything you do. And school is usually the easy one because you can apply it directly to school, but it's like what you're learning here, you could do in the classroom. What you learn here, you can do at home with your parents or with your siblings. And it's a lot of the educational part of it. I think that's one thing that kind of shocked me a little bit this past year with coaching with the rookie ball guys was how much just like education of basic stuff it was. You think of like coaching at pro ball and like these guys have a good understanding and know the game and figure a lot of things out themselves. But it seemed like a lot of education had to be at the forefront with working with some of these players, which I don't know why in my mind just didn't really hit me until I started working with the guys. I don't know if it's just you get the pro ball mindset of like, okay, I'm working with professionals, they should know some of this stuff, and a lot of it was pretty raw for them. So taking a step back and doing that now with these 14-year-olds is it's been fun.
Yeah, that's a really good prior experience. And you're 100% right. I mean, the pro ball, it's not each professional player, even if they're the same age, have so much different backgrounds. Like um, an international player, so basically a Latin player, um, a high school U.S. player, a college player, what type of college that person went to, like those are completely different um, backgrounds. They're at different points in their career. When they get to you, they have a different set of experiences and skill sets. But in the rookie ball example, where you're, I mean, older now, so we'll call them kids, but these 17, 18, 19-year olds that are in rookie ball that have uh, a different, they're at a different point in their educational journey. And then they're also in a different country, most of them with a different language. They're learning concepts that are uh, the concepts that are hard for any hitter to learn, but then also maybe different from what they've been brought up in. And they're also doing while actively facing really good competition. And there's pressure from it. So just to go through all that and then to bring that back to the kids you're working with now, it's like you have a better appreciation of where they're at from like a personal development standpoint, and then also like what it can be. I mean, you've played at a much higher level, the highest level. Um, so you have good like a well-rounded set of experiences for them. So that's got to be pretty cool to have that perspective.
Yeah, it's been fun, and you're learning so much. I feel like you learn so much with the young guys. Like you said, you get to a certain level, and things kind of just operate on their own, if that makes sense. Like you have the same conversations with guys um, at your level, and it's all kind of the same thing. You're kind of saying the same thing over and over again. Like, oh, look for this, make this move. But like with the young kids, it's from the ground. Like the ground floor of explanation. And so you have to reteach yourself like how to think about it because you've already moved past those steps when you're talking to somebody at a high level. So like I almost had to relearn like a lot of things. And like, how do I explain that to somebody that, doesn't quite know what I'm trying to get at when I say the lower half? You know what I'm saying? Or rotate using the hips. Um, so it has been fun, almost like reteaching myself a lot of these things.
Yeah, I that's such a good point that you bring up, dude. And I've had similar experiences where you start out for me anyways, I started out coaching when I was 20 and I coach, you get the young 13U team that's not very talented and you're like, "Oh yeah, like here I go, my first opportunity, you're making a big difference." And then you climb the ladder, so to speak, and you're coaching, varsity baseball and then you're coaching 16, 17, 18U and it's high intensity, the baseball's better quality, and then for whatever reason, like for me, I've had multiple reasons where I've gone and done this, but then you go back and you coach 13U again, it's like holy shit, like I got to teach a double cut again and where everybody needs to be all the time. And like you said, dude, it's super refreshing. That's what it feels like to me, is you're really doing a lot of work. You're doing a lot of work. Not to say that, because I don't have the experience, and I can say that from my experience, it is still a lot of work to coach in college baseball, and I'm sure it's a lot of work to coach in professional baseball. But when you go and you get to coach 14U like you're describing, or you get a 13U travel baseball team that you happen to be around and you coach around, it's like it's a completely different gear, and it also broadens your perspective to so many different things. And I'm sure, like, have you found that getting the experience with the younger guys is going to help you or has helped you with the professional guys? Like, what kind of things do you think that calls attention to that you think are going to help you with your professional coaching?
Oh, for sure. It's going over like the small details. And KB was doing a great job with me this past year of explaining how to explain. And I'm still something I'm always trying to work on, but like if you're trying to explain something from the ground up, you really have to go through the whole process and you have to remember, okay, if I can't jump to point C if I don't go over point A and point B and make sure that they got an understanding of that first. And so it really does. It challenges, at least it's challenged me of making sure I'm going back and making sure that they understand the first few steps first before I can get to point C. Because a lot of times I took that for granted and I would just start talking about point C and they're looking at me and they're trying it. It's still not clicking. And like you said, they get frustrated and it's like, well, did I do my due diligence of laying the groundwork of getting to what I'm trying to teach them?
Well, also to be fair, you had been, uh, the back half of your career, it seems, you had been in the upper levels of the minor leagues. You had been doing ba baseball and thinking about the game in a super, super nuanced, specific way to you and like your approach and like how things are going. And you're surrounded by other like grown ass men that have done this at a high level for a long time. And then you went some other organizations still at like the AAA level, and then next thing you know, uh, less than a year later, if I have that right, you're now coaching 17-year-old Dominican players. So
Yeah,
it's the same game, of course, but you're thinking about baseball in a uh, very like high end way for a while. So then to just like get shot back into like, wait, he doesn't know that we have to do the same routine every day. He doesn't even know why that would even be like, forget wanting to do it. He doesn't even know why that's good.
right,
Like it's I, of course, like you're not gonna just be like on that. You're not gonna know where they're at until you learn that.
right. No, that's 100% it. I remember that there was like a moment, like maybe a weekend where I was like, I had to take a deep breath. And I was like, okay, I got to reassess like how I'm going about this because I'm not doing a good job if I just jump in the way that I have been talking about the game, like you said, for the last, 5 years or so. I gotta now understand what it means to be an educator. So that's really what, especially with the young guys, you got to do, learn how to educate. You can't just jump right into a concept. So it was good. It was a great challenge for me. And now that I'm doing it with younger guys again, I can now continue to try to practice that skill. And um, like you're saying, Dwayne, hopefully over time I can now build that skill and then re-implement it to whatever level. And now I feel like I'll have more complete catalog of working with guys and how to approach each guy because now I've had that experience of working from the ground up.
It's so
Yeah.
cool to hear you talking about how you are trying to improve on these aspects as a coach. It's very similar to the grind of a player doing everything you can to improve yourself. And I have so many refreshing conversations with people like yourself that talk about improving themselves as a coach. Man, I like it is just I don't know. I love that stuff. This is why I do it, man. It just I'm hearing you talk about this shit. I'm like, man, this guy's got the bug. This guy's talking about taking online courses and learning. I love that. The learning really does never stop. Is that something that,
Yeah.
you start coaching, you getting into coaching now, and was that something you were conscious of, or it's just that's just how you are in regards to your approach to certain things?
I think that's just how I approach things. Kind of going back to what Kyle asked when he asked what I was like when I was younger. I was always just interested in learning new things, and um, I've always been a good student because I liked learning. I liked the process of learning. I always joked like if I could find a job where I was just taking classes and getting paid for it, I'd do it no problem. So I find that fun, and so even coming into coaching, like I knew right away that. Even though I have a certain level of expertise as a player, and some of that will translate, like I'm learning this from the ground, and I gotta find ways to build off that. And obviously, I learned real quickly that what I thought I was going to learn was different than what I ended up learning. Um, but I think sometimes I probably would have benefited um, a little bit more from using that expertise and feeling like I could use that because I did. I almost felt like I was learning something super like at the novice level. I don't know if this is how you felt, Kyle, at all, but I was very open to feedback and trying to figure out what I was doing as a coach. And sometimes I feel like if I would have leaned more on my experience as a player and kind of used that to build um, when I first got going with coaching, that might have helped a little bit. But yeah, I'm always trying to take the novice approach when it comes to something that I don't know. Like I'm always gonna default to the people that have done it and have been there and like listen to them. And I think sometimes that can get me in trouble, but also I think it comes in with an open mind and eager to try to improve at whatever that is.
Yeah, I mean, going from my experience with you is you were about as open to criticism and seeking help from others and just a willingness to completely discard it goes back to the ego thing, but like completely willingness to discard what it is that you think about how something should be in order to get it right for the players or just your current responsibilities. Um,
Mm,
you I had to like pinch myself figuratively a few times because I think we're the same high school year, but you're slightly older than me, and you had played at levels upon. I've, certainly from when I've played, I'd even coached at, and you show up and you had this way about you that was almost like hey, like I'm new to coaching, I'm in my early 20s, and just like tell me what I don't know and I'm open. Which, given your just background on paper, like you wouldn't expect that. Um, so I think it was really good for you to do that from a coaching standpoint to learn, okay, what is it that I don't know? I'm willing to be exposed and how my mind changed on things. But something I was always wanted to be careful of was to make sure that once you kind of got a sense of okay, like I have my footing, I think I know what's important and whatnot, like to then lean into those experiences you've had, which I think you started to do towards the end. And that was really cool to see because I mean, you were like, yeah, thank you so much. Like you're really giving me your time and you're helping me through this, and I really appreciate it. And you showed that in many different ways. But I told you, I was like, don't worry. Like at some point, I'm going to learn a lot from you. Because I'm going to ask you, like, hey, what was it like when you were in this situation in an environment that I haven't experienced yet? Or you would just
mm.
ask a question that, like, why is it like that? Or, like, how is it that, um, how to explain this whole coaching thing, the art of it, the nuance, like how do you teach that to someone? It's one thing to talk with another person who knows it, but how do you teach that? Kind of like it was a very similar thing for me. You talked about how like I know baseball, but I have to now educate the game or teach the game, which is, it's a different skill, right? Well,
Right.
starting to get good at coaching it is a different skill than showing someone how to do it.
Right.
Because you could talk about it for 6 hours, but you can't say what it is. That means that you're not, you don't have it yet. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I don't even
Yeah.
remember what you asked, but that
And
was
no, and like you said, like there's a good balance. We've talked about this throughout the podcast. There's always a good balance with whatever you're talking about, whether it's the ego or like expertise. Like there's a balance of being open-minded and uh, being able to listen to other coaches and learn from them when this is your first time doing it. But then I also probably should have had a little bit more of like, look, take what I am an expert at and what I have achieved and make sure that I'm pairing the two together and blending the two. Where I feel like at first I was really just leaning in on, let me just learn how to be a coach and not allowing that second half to come in. So finding that balance and again, everything is universal, but finding that balance with whatever you're talking about is hugely important. And it's hard. It's hard to like, all right, I'm going to learn one way, and then I still need to like pile in what's on the other side of that scale. And so, I mean, it goes for anything, for anybody that's out there listening, like making sure to how do we do that? Do you guys have a good explanation of how to find balance in really whatever you're talking about?
I was gonna ask you. I don't know if we have. I don't know if we got that.
I mean, I think you actually described this perfectly earlier, Taylor, when you described I have I've got a couple things written down here, and one thing that I have circled like 16 times is awareness, awareness, awareness. Like that awareness piece is so important. And when you described your awareness to how you are as an individual in general versus what was required for you to how it was required for you to be a certain way on the baseball field is sort of how you achieve that level of balance, recognizing, having that awareness to I need to be this way, I need to be this way, because again we talked about this earlier. You're not going to treat everybody the same. You might have somebody that has a similar issue to somebody else in the past, but they have completely different levels of understanding. They have completely different personalities. You might have to gain person number two's trust way differently than you gained person number one's trust. So it's having that awareness and then being able to put on maybe a different character for that particular situation. Maybe putting a little bit more of an emphasis on a certain part of your personality in one environment, and then like you described when you first got into coaching, being in that learning state of mind in a different environment. So I think that that balance comes from just being vulnerable at times, allowing yourself to be a professional at times, being able to talk and speak on your own experiences in a confident way, knowing that your experiences do have so much value and could pass so much knowledge on to people. I think that's kind of how we can achieve that balance. And then, in a whole other situation, being able to say, I don't fucking know. I don't know. Because I think that there's just as much power in being able to say, I don't know, as there is saying, yes, I do actually have an answer for this, and this is why. So I think that's kind of how you can achieve that balance. But what I just want you to know, Taylor, is I feel like you have all the tools, man. You got all the tools. You say all the freaking right things, and it's exciting. It's exciting stuff. I could freaking talk to you for freaking hours about this stuff, dude. This has been a lot of fun.
It really has been. I agree. Yeah, the tools are there. I mean, that's why we hired you. That's why after you were hired, separate, multiple people that are in a position of power within organization that, when privately spoke about you, they've all said, he'll figure it out, like, because of this, and this, and this. And I agree. And I've said the same thing behind your back to others. Um, I have, that's something I'll do. If I find someone that I think highly of, I will go around and tell everyone. But to the whole balance thing is actually something I have been wanting to ask you. I told you that we didn't have any structure for today, but I had like one or two things in mind that I wanted to make sure that I picked your brain on. This is something that selfishly I'm curious about, but I know that basically anyone that's listening that has spent time away from family and loved ones because of this game would love to listen to, but doesn't always come up. Can you speak to your journey, your experience, your strategy, and whatever else for the amount of time that you've spent away from your family, from your wife, and then before when you were dating, and just balancing all of that? Because that's something that, in my opinion, is the most difficult thing about pro baseball, or just baseball in general, when you're moving around a lot, is the things that you're not doing because of the game. And I
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, obviously you're sacrificing a ton of time and um, like moments and opportunities with your families, with your loved ones. That's been something that's always like weighed on me heavy. I think as I was playing, like I was very aware of like the sacrifices I was making. Very aware that like from a very, I mean, basically since high school, I had been out of the house and wasn't really around my family as much as I'd want to. You know, I'd see them for holidays, um, and like periodically throughout the year, but a lot of the times I wouldn't see them. And so it would be over the phone or over a video call or whatever. So that kind of starts to weigh on you a little bit. And then trying to maintain a relationship that way as well has been tough. Um, Unfortunately, we haven't had the luxury of her having a job where she could just pick up and move around with me. I know a lot of girlfriends and wives have that opportunity, so it makes it a little bit easier, which even then it's still hard because then you're asking somebody to follow you around everywhere. Um, so there was a lot of time apart. Like we probably spent maybe 3 to 5 months a year together for like 8 years. So like there's a lot of missing time within that. And so I think that's one of the things I'm reflecting on now is now that I'm done and why I'm choosing to take some time to really lean into those things is because I did feel like while I was playing, I was sacrificing those things. And I think the sacrifice was warranted. Like everything that I experienced throughout my career and the places I've gone and the people that I've met and the opportunities that I've had, I would do it all over again. Um, but again, we talk about it. There's a balance I do feel like, and um, leaning into some of those things now, and maybe I'm giving up opportunity or chances because of it. I think that's okay. I think that's something I can live with because I didn't get that time while I was playing. So, spending more time with my wife or taking trips to go see my family multiple times this year, or, traveling, getting to just go out and experience different things, different people away from the game. I mean, you guys know, even as a player, when you have off seasons or time away from the game, everything is surrounded by the game. Like what you're eating, how you're behaving, who you're interacting with, your schedule. You got a workout routine that you got to maintain. And so even when you're not playing and you have that freedom and that free time, it's still, is consumed by the game, which is great. And I think it, holds structure and you need that. But I've always felt like I needed a little bit of exploration, a little bit of freedom. And so, that's what I'm doing now. So I'm trying to lean into and, we'll see how it plays out, but I feel like it's been something that's been high on my bucket list is taking that time and taking these moments. So
What's it
I'm
like
excited
for
for it.
yeah? What's it like? So you get 3 5 months, especially in probably get 3 to 5 months where you're in the off season, you're home wherever that is, and then the other part of the year you're away. Now I'm sure like there you get different, she'll visit and you got like an all-star break or so, like you got little bits where you get to see them here and there, but for the most part you're gone. Um, what have been your strategies? Because this isn't something that's really talked about or that is necessarily like taught. Like how, as a player, or really anyone that just or player coach, the same thing. You're away from someone. What are some strategies, or like what does it look like for you to maintain a distance and not just be like, hey, stick around. I'll be back in a couple months, but to actually, try to be there and be supportive and all of that.
Yeah, you do got to get creative with how you go about it. We'd always try to structure, at least for my wife, like every month or couple of months, have time where she can come out and visit and stay for like an extended period of time, whether that's a week, whether that's a couple weeks or longer. And then it's doing what you can creatively to stay connected while apart. So obviously, like a lot of FaceTimes and video calls where we're eating dinner together, or just like hanging out on the phone together, or making sure that we're having the same interactions and conversations that we'd be having if I was home, like during the off season. Um, checking in every day, filling in each other on what's new, what's going on. Um, that's a big part of it. Um, and then like leaning in on the people that are around you. That's one thing that I felt I was really excited about this past year with the complex. It felt like people were really into wanting to be around each other, not just at work, which I feel like is huge for a work environment. But even as a player, like you're around your teammates all the time, and I can kind of feel like it's like overwhelming to just, okay, now that we've spent 12 hours at the field together, we're going to go hang out and go do something else together. But I mean, those are the people that you have. You're usually in random cities that you don't know anybody. So unless you're going out and meeting people that live in those random towns, which sometimes you do, but like you're around those people, so leaning in on them, and they're going through the same thing you're going through. So um, kind of using them as that support system to kind of get you through is a big part of it as well.
Something else you had mentioned in the past was that support system for you, like having people you work with or other friends or things to do interpersonally during the season. But then you also had that set up for your wife back home.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's made it tough for her to disconnect from being home and coming out and living with me. She's done a great job of creating her own community here. She's a personal trainer and fitness coach, and so that core of people is very similar to what you'll find in a clubhouse. Um, they're worried about maintaining health and how you're doing as a person, and they want to include you in things and go out and do things where they're connecting outside of the gym. So I think that's been really helpful for her. I don't know if she would have been able to navigate all this stuff if she didn't have her own community at home to have as support. And then it makes it nice because then when I come home for the 3 or 4 months that I am at home, uh, I have a group of people in a community now that I can indulge with. I can hang out with these people and go do things. And now I'm not just coming home to a random city that I'm staying at for a few months and then I'll leave again for work. I now have a place that I can call home and a group of people that I can spend time with and that are friends. So it's difficult to maintain like a relationship like that, but if you have the right support systems, it can be done. And I think we've gone through our fair share of stuff as a couple, but like when you have a system like that in place and you have those people around you, it makes it a lot easier to be successful with.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like on your part, your wife's part, and the people around you guys that it was a team effort, which I think which I think is so important. allowing that, allowing her to have her space, allowing her to have her thing, whether it's, her with her job and the community around her job, and you with your job and the people around you, allowing you guys to have your space, having your time to share those moments, whether it's through work or through your social life. And then it sounds like a really nice part of it was, like you just described there at the end, when you do come home, it adds to that community aspect of it for you guys too, which I think only strengthened the relationship, which is, I would imagine, something that you guys learned along the way.
Yeah, for sure. The I think they say distance makes the heart grow fonder. So like you get time to miss your partner, which is we look at it as like a nice thing because then when we do see each other, it kind of does feel refreshed. It kind of does feel like you're meeting that person and introducing yourself to that person over and over and over again. And it's kind of nice because we are always changing too. That's the thing that can kind of become a juggling act is where you go, 4 or 5 months without seeing each other. There's going to be things that happen, experiences that you both have that slightly alter who you are, right? And so like at one point you see each other and then you're a certain way, and then maybe there's something that's a little different for good or for bad. And then so now you're like reintroducing yourself and refining how you can like intermesh with each other, if that makes sense, as slightly different people. Obviously, you're always going to have your core values and who you are as a person, but we're always changing. And so I find that fun because I always have high interest in like meeting new people. So for me, I love that. And I think my wife appreciates that just as well. Um, but it is, and it's always been about like other people for me. Like even going through my career, I always felt like I was doing it like for my family or like I was doing it for the people closest to me. So it's always been kind of fun to like anytime there is an accomplishment or an achievement, all that stuff goes back home to the parents. Like even like the high level stuff where, I was long gone out of the house and, you get the high school awards and whatever, and they love to keep that stuff. But even like a lot of the professional stuff, and I was lucky enough to be a part of the roster when the team won the World Series. So I got a World Series ring. So like even, I sent that back to the parents. It's almost like a momentum of like, look, we were all in this together. Like you guys had to put in just as much work for me to achieve the stuff as I did. So it's been like a whole group effort for sure.
The your willingness or even your like longing to share those things with them is an important thing. Where you get a World Series ring and you're not thinking like, oh, this is worth so much money and like, oh, I get to keep this and I get to show people. You're like, oh, like mom and dad are gonna like this.
Yeah.
Or you have some new experience and you want to, like, as much as it's yours and you're off on your own in a way, um, you also get to like, I can't wait to tell so and so about it. And like that excitement and that novelty, but then also keeping them connected is um, important things, and certainly things that I've observed in you, having spent the last year with you. As you're
Yeah,
away
because
from everyone.
exactly, like I could look at that in my perspective of like I'm the one that's away from them doing my career and going through all this, but they kind of have to miss out on it just as much. Like I know it kills my mom that she can't be at every game that I'm playing at, or you know what I'm saying? And so like they're missing out on time just as much as I am. And so I feel like, honoring them and bringing that back to them, it's the journey that we're all on kind of together.
No, that's definitely a good way to motivate, because we all go through our struggles, whether it's as an individual or in a relationship or as a family unit. But those moments to celebrate almost answer the question of why you go through those tough times. So I think you being able to share in your victories, as big or small as they may have been, is definitely a way of also saying, hey, this is why we went through this is why we went through that, this is why we made these sacrifices. So that's definitely a testament to the type of person that you are, that you're able, and it helps in the relationship with these people, whether it's your wife or your family, to be able to say, hey, this, this is why we did, this is why we went through we went through these tough times for this. So
Hmm. Yeah, there's always motivation on an individual level, but once you start realizing that a lot of the stuff that you're doing for is for other people, I think it just heightens. I mean, you guys know as coaches, like when you feel like you're part of something bigger and you have other people that you're doing this for and with, it just amplifies the motivation. It feels so much better too to do something that's like for other people than it is just for yourself. Like I don't know if that's just something you start to learn as you get older or um, just like type of personality. Like what are things that when you guys feel like you're motivated the most, um, where do you feel like that's coming from?
It I don't have a good way to articulate it, but you were talking about the same sort of thing earlier, where that version of yourself that you're becoming, or maybe not changing into, but that part of you that's been dormant that you're now expressing, or that you're able to feed or like lean into more that you weren't previously. And like that growth, but it's like a growth from within that's expanding rather than you leaping to another character. Um, Feeling that is really motivating. Now, what that looks like who you're spending time with, where you're putting your effort into, the habits you're trying to build, the experiences you're trying to get, the things you're trying to learn, those might change. But I guess like leaning into that, um, when I'm doing that, I feel really very aligned and working
Mhm.
all day and putting in a lot of effort, especially when I feel really aligned in doing those things and putting in a ton of effort. But to your point earlier, having someone in a group of people that you can also balance out with and like maintain that like human connection and that those sorts of things, that's that's when I'm at my best.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I can relate to that too, Kyle. I think my foundation is knowing that the people who care about me want me to be the best version of myself. So I'm able to operate knowing that to get to the highest version of myself or the best version of myself, I have to do certain things, whether it's something like doing a podcast because, the people that are closest to me or have been the closest to me know that for years I've wanted to do something like this, or achieving a certain physical goal or something involved with my career. I'm able to comfortably go and attempt to do those things, and I feel motivated to do those things because I know, you know I'm not saying that I'm going to be the best at it or the most successful at these things, but I know that I will be the highest version of myself if I put these things into action. And my family and the people that care about me the most know that I'll be happy doing that. And then to go to take it even a step further, Kyle and I talk about this all the time. I have fun experiences to share with those people now. When I do get to meet with them, when I do get to be around them, I get to talk about what it's like to be on the podcast and have conversations with great people like yourself. And I get to talk about, when I'm on the field and putting some of these things into practice with the players that I'm around, and the funny shit that happens, the jackass moments that happens, and everything else in between. And when the times get tough, they can remind you of the good times when you're, and they could not even know anything about what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but they might remember something that you shared, and it helps bring that motivation back when things are difficult. So I think it's that community aspect that you touched upon, but for me it just comes from that foundation. I'm very fortunate to have parents and siblings and a family and friends that I feel their care and I feel their love for me, so it allows me to express that highest version of myself.
Taylor, I'm curious because I haven't spoken to you outside of text since I've seen you a few months ago. Um, what are you excited about this year and just moving forward?
Uh, like the exploration part. Like I I keep bringing it up, and I've told you many times, but like I think sometimes we like get boxed into a path or like what we think should be, um, just from seeing like what's in front of us because we think we know what we're supposed to be doing, and the thing that we should be doing is like right next to us the whole time. So I'm just kind of like exploring. And I think that's the one thing I'm most excited about. I'm getting to do some of the travel that I've always wanted to do. I'm spending an extended period of time with my wife that I've always wanted to do. I'm getting to go see my family more often. I'm getting to work with something that I wanted to do. I'm back taking some classes, which is kind of occupying me and something that I've always enjoyed doing. So I'm just trying to like fill like my time with things that like motivate me, that I'm excited about, that I'm interested in, that I'm passionate about, and just kind of seeing where it takes me, without feeling like I need to be doing something or need to be in a certain place or like have to have, you know, passion or place to be. Um, so yeah, and just kind of seeing where that takes me. And I feel like, um, again, kind of like we've been talking about through this whole conversation, I just allow what my authentic self wants to explore and be a part of, just let that guide me and then figure out, what are the next steps from there. So there's not a whole lot of like hard set plans. There's things that we're, but yeah, just exploring and kind of living a little bit.
It's good. You certainly earned it. I mean, you've been going through a very structured, from what you've described, a very structured school, sports, travel, baseball, the whole thing since, teenage years. And so then to be, and then, college and then immediately right in the pro ball and then doing that. And like you said, spending more than half of each year for the past 8 years with, um, just being away from home. So to have a chance to kind of make up for some of that. And I also think there's more depth when you say I'm traveling because you're not I don't know if you're even on Instagram, but you're not going and doing this thing and spending so much time, looking at through these experiences through your phone to tell the world because you want attention and then, come back. Like you're like I'm sure you're taking pictures or whatever, but you're going there because and I know you like you want to just be interacting with people and like talking to them and seeing what they're like and ask them what they think about things, and it's a cool thing to see you be able to do. Taylor, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, I had a technical difficulty with one of my headphones. But that's one thing that I'm starting to learn is like it's kind of about experience and like enjoying life and going through the hardships of life is what it's about. And so, um, yeah, just kind of living through it, experiencing the things, uh, whether it be through travel or with the people I love, um, and just be there for it. It's not really for other people, right? This is my life. This is what I gotta to deal with when I get to the end of it. So, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I feel like everybody else is trying to do, you know. Um, and so I think a lot of that comes from just experimenting, exploring, and seeing what you enjoy.
Yeah, I think something that encapsulates, and it's kind of funny, and Kyle might not be a saying guy, but I'm definitely a saying guy. I love my sayings, but something that one of the assistant coach and myself say all the time at St. Joe's is the only way is the way. And on the surface, it sounds like we're saying that there's only one way to do things, but it's actually, it means the opposite. And it's that for every situation, there might be a completely new way to do things. So when you leave yourself open to those kinds of experiences, I really do think anything is possible. And it has that explorer type mindset to it, that explorer approach. And I think you described it perfectly when you said that beginner's mindset to everything. I think leaves you open to some really quality experiences.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, Taylor, I appreciate you joining us. Um, I had really high expectations for this, and I told Dwayne about them beforehand. And just within minutes, it was like, this is better than I thought it'd be.
Yeah, dude,
Well,
that
I'm
was
glad. I'm glad we have
I,
this
I
conversation
I
and do
said
this.
I told Dwayne, I was like, Taylor's going to be the first guest we have that's going to ask like as many or more questions than we do.
yeah.
Um,
I'm
I
glad I
love
didn't
that.
disappoint on that front.
no, no, no,
Uh,
no. It's good. We didn't get to as much of your whole like story as I would have liked, but I think what's really cool and kind
yeah,
of what we talked about earlier is that we got a sense of just how you are, which I think is really more so what people are interested in. Is like what's someone like that that's been in your shoes and done what you've done, like what's that person like? And we absolutely crushed that today. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, man. Thank you
I
so
love
much.
that.
Thank you so much for being on. And I've said this in the past to a couple of people that we've had conversations with on this, but it's super motivating and inspiring to me to know that there are people like yourself in our game and involved with educating younger people and just people in general through coaching and through just life experience type of stuff. So I am very grateful to have had you on today and gotten to have this conversation. I feel very privileged to have had you on today. Thank you.
I appreciate that, guys. No, I love these just because, like Kyle said from the beginning, sitting and having conversations is there's always a benefit both ways, and everybody learns something. There's always takeaways from it. So I appreciate being on. If you guys ever need more conversations and want to sit down, let me know.
Yes, sir.
I know a lot of this is about leadership too, and uh, in coaching. That's where this podcast is turned towards. But Kyle will let you know. I like exploring thoughts on the most random things. So if we
Well,
ever get a chance again,
well, absolutely, that'll happen. But
uh,
it's coaching and leadership. It is and it isn't. I mean, when Dwayne and I were deciding what to call this and the direction we wanted to go, like we wanted it to be super vague because
We love the
we wanted,
nuance.
yeah, well, we want it to be able to go wherever it goes.
mhm.
Like I don't want to force like okay, we got Taylor Jones coming on. I don't want to force Taylor into this lane of a conversation. Like, could you do it? Sure, but like I'd
Mhm.
rather like if something else comes up, then like that's what comes up.
Sure.
Will it tie back to coaching and leadership? Yes, because that's what we do. So like naturally, that's going to come up. But it's not really the purpose, and that's why I wanted to have you on because I knew we'd go other places.
And we got to have you on
Right.
again.
Like Dwayne said earlier, it all connects anyways. So you
Hmm.
can find ways back to it always.
Yeah. All right,
And you're
dude.
coming back. You're coming back on, dude. You are. You got to get back.
You
You
guys,
got to get back on.
you guys are back on. You got 100,000 followers and all that. I'll be back.
Oh, I can't
Uh,
wait to have you back. Not for the followers. That sounds stressful.
You didn't talk about leadership
That's
today. What the
hilarious.
hell?
Oh my god.
Uh,
Yeah. All right, dude.
uh,
Thank you so much.
well, thank you guys. Yeah, yeah.